Stakes, episode 11. I'm your host, Neil Orfield, and my guest today is the #1 ranked heavyweight player in the world, according to the Roto-Grinders rankings. That means he's the #1 player, spending an average of $20 to $49.99 per entry currently in the world. He's also somebody you know pretty well, probably if you pay a lot of attention to Awesemo content. He's doing content all the time. He's in the Discords. He's a fan favorite. He's one of the best NBA DFS players in the world. And he's a friend of mine who I got to meet this year in Arizona at a live final. RynPak, how are you doing?
Doing well. Excited to be joining you on your high stakes series. You've done a phenomenal job, and more importantly, happy to share my insight and talk about my journey here.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. I'm excited to have you on. We had a good time. We spent a lot of time talking about DFS in Arizona, so we can continue that conversation in front of everybody else here. Let's jump right in. Let's talk about your background a little bit, because a lot of people probably don't know your background. Let's start with your background just in fields that are relevant to DFS, and then maybe we can talk more generally. First of all, do you have a background in statistics? Do you have formal or informal training?
Yeah, I took statistics in college. I took a course in college. So that's the, I guess, formal training. My background, I guess, my background is DFS. I don't come from poker. I don't come from investment banking. I don't come from accounting. I am a straight up, whatever I've learned from DFS is playing DFS. Anything game theory oriented, it has been all daily fantasy sports from 2015 onwards. The last time I took a math class was differential equations when I was a senior in high school. So I was always pretty solid at math. I was pretty 2 or 3 years ahead in math when I was in high school. I didn't need to take math in undergrad when I was in school. So it just because of my major at the time and what I was pursuing, I didn't need math as much. So I pretty much fulfilled my math requirement. Looking back at it, I wish I took more math just because it probably would have advanced, maybe accelerated my success in DFS. Who knows? It's hindsight 2020, but that is my background.
You just slid into that you were 2 to 3 years ahead in math growing up. I mean, I was in the AP math classes, so I thought I was pretty good. You know, I was never really interested in it, but I was like pretty good at it naturally. And then I stopped doing it as soon as I possibly could. I was not 2 to 3 years ahead though. Were you taking classes like with older kids, or were there other people in your classes that were your same age?
Yeah, I think my senior year, I was taking classes at the community college just to get college credit. But I did take all those AP requirements, AP statistics, and I was always pretty quick with math and understanding it. It made a lot of sense to me. Being an immigrant family, math is something that is pretty not forced onto you. It's meant to be a backbone of your academic success and studies. So math, it was always something that I was really good at. I've always gotten A's in math. There's nothing else besides that. But that success probably has helped to translate in DFS, just being able to quick think on your feet. And I do think it has paid off over time for sure.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, because I feel like that is an important trait in DFS, is just having general understanding general concepts of math, like probabilities and things. A lot of people really struggle with probabilities, and why don't you just play the team that is, you know, the highest projected? Why do you factor in ownership, that kind of stuff? And I think that really understanding probabilities has helped me, at least in my game, a lot. And it sounds like it's probably something that is helping you as well, if these are things that come naturally to you. Do you have any background in computer programming?
Yeah, so I went back to grad school between 2019 to 2021. I went back to Michigan for grad school. I got my master's in health informatics, where it's kind of a hybrid between the School of Information and Public Health and Medicine, where I learned a lot more data analysis, some very early basic stage programming, which has helped a little bit, but I haven't fully been able to maximize it into my DFS process. I just wanted to be able to quickly analyze data using different software programs, that being R or Python, a little bit of SQL, but nothing too extravagant where I don't think I can use it to a point where I can automate my process yet, which would be awesome. But my process does require a lot of manual legwork. So my own intuition is into the process I build in and day out playing DFS. But I do have very, very limited programming background.
So you say that it's not really a part of your process, and we'll get into your process a little bit more too, but I'm just curious. So are you using it then to like back test how you're doing and stuff, and like looking at slates in the past, or is it something that you're just not really incorporated into your DFS much at all at this point?
Not really that much at all. It's just simple. If I need to get some data and look at it real quick, I would, but I really don't use it much for DFS. I wanted to. I thought there was a pathway to do it. I just think there are great tools out there that where it will do the legwork for you, and it's pretty good. The only difference is if you were to build your own things in your own program, you probably could get it more efficient and more up to speed to what you want.
Right.
But there are some great customizable tools available to any customer, any user, or any player out there.
Okay, that makes sense. And as far as so you say your whole background is DFS. You are, I was just telling you before the show, I think you're probably the youngest person I've had on as a guest. You're still, what are you, 28?
Not yet. I will be.
Not yet 28.
Yeah.
So your whole background is in DFS, and you've been crushing it for at least a few years now. So it seems like you've been playing since, you're pretty young. Let's start with your background in DFS. Approximately when did you start getting involved, and what drew you in?
I can tell you exactly when I started getting involved. So it was the summer between my junior and senior year in undergrad at Michigan. I was studying for the MCAT, the exam to get applied to medical school, and I was just finding reasons to distract myself while studying for probably the most important exam at the time I was taking. And I heard some ad about fantasy sports, and this was something that I've always played fantasy sports, all dating back to like 2006, like Yahoo season long leagues. Always been very interested in statistics. I would get the Sunday newspaper, read up the box scores when I was a kid. It's something that I've always enjoyed doing, sports numbers and just knowing what was happening in the sports world. It was like always been a passion of mine. I never really liked reading novels or books. I enjoyed reading ESPN magazine. I enjoyed reading Sports Illustrated magazine. So sports was always something that I always really was very interested in and just knowing. So when I heard the ad, I was like, oh, I know this pretty well. I've been playing fantasy season-long leagues and free leagues for a long time and was doing all right with them. I remember in 2006, I played like some of the free leagues. I came third out of 12th, and I was thrilled. I was in the 6th grade. I was like, oh, I know my stuff. But little did I know that like little things I learned there would help me out years down the line. So I heard the ad on a podcast I was listening to. I was like, oh, let me try this out. At the time, I believe there was great deposit offers, but when you're an undergrad college student, you don't have much money to spend on leisure stuff. And I was like, yeah, I'll deposit $5 and see how it goes. And I did get some success right off the bat in 2015. And that probably did derail my MCAT studies and my medical school pursuit, where I believe in my second week, I was so thrilled that I turned $1 into $100, where I was like, oh, this is awesome. I'm going to get all my buddies drinks at the bar. This is going to be a great time. And I've been playing ever since then. And it's been a fun ride. But the success wasn't there right off the bat. I definitely did struggle for about 2 or 3 years. I did not have I think my first 5-figure win came 4 years after I started playing. So I definitely went through the trials and tribulations of being a novice DFS player. So
did you have any losing seasons right away? Like
when I started, I've always had a 1099 since I've started. So
okay,
that's
so you had some success right away. I mean, you were playing lower volume, so even if you by your standards now, you weren't a majorly successful player, but you were a winning player, which is it's not the majority of players. The majority of players are not winning money. You were at least winning money right away. I had at least 1 or 2 losing seasons. I mean, when I started, I think I started off with a couple losing seasons and then had another one maybe 5 years ago. So doing better than me in that front. But so it sounds like you started, you're probably right around 2015. You said you heard an ad, and I'm reading Dueling with Kings right now and kind of reading about the backstory. And I didn't remember that there were like DraftKings ads every other minute on TV in commercials at the time. Was it kind of that timeline where it was they were really ramping up DFS, DraftKings and FanDuel competing for market share and both having commercials all the time? Do you recall that?
Yeah, it was 2015. It was 2015 summer. So this is leading up to a few months leading up to Ethan Gate, which is I think 2015 fall. So yes, the ads everywhere nonstop. I didn't have enough money to take advantage of those deposit offers. Looking back at it, and I just didn't really use anyone's insight or projections or anything. I was just hand building lineups on my phone, just building lineups away on my phone, and that's all I was doing. It was MLB season, so there was a different scoring back in the day. You would get penalized for outs. A lot has changed in terms of scoring since then, and I just was like, yeah, I'm gonna do this. And then I was like, all right, I didn't play much volume till like I needed to go to my senior year spring break, where I was like, I needed some extra cash. So I started playing a little bit more volume, and then one of the good good success stories was I guess spring break and senior is like I forget how much it was. Maybe I needed like $500 or something. I covered it in 2 nights of playing. I was like, all right, this is great. I can go to spring break. So I wasn't playing like every day. I was playing like whenever I could because of school and everything. And that's the success I had then. And then I had a job after school. I wanted to pursue medical school, so I worked in the OR in the operating room. Or I was just working with I was helping. I was like a neurophysiologist was the official name, but I was not an MD, obviously. But I was helping surgeons monitor like motor potentials, somatosensory evoked potentials during like brain and spine surgery. And like essentially, there were times where I'm not going to lie, I might have hand built a lineup when there was a little surgery action happening when things were a little low.
Oh, so no, RynPak. All right, so just getting back to, so you started with baseball, is that? Did I hear that right? You first, and were you playing cash games at the time, or were you already playing GPPs and winning?
I would build one lineup. I was a one lineup guy for many, many years. I would throw it in 50-50s. And when I first started playing, I kid you not, the first couple months until like took about 7 or 8 months where I was playing like single dollar, like $5-6 a night. And that my bankroll was essentially whatever I had in my bank account as a college kid. It's not much, maybe less than $1,000 at the time. You just don't have much on you.
I mean, I remember.
Yeah.
So how many people had to die for you to get your lineups in to be able to go for spring break? You know, while you were supposed to be watching their surgeries, you're making lineups. So you lose 3 or 4.
So no, that spring break was before I started working in the OR. So I started working in the OR that following fall. No one died. Don't get me wrong. Right. I really enjoyed my experience in the OR. It was probably the best decision I did at the time to understand if I was ready for medical school. And I wasn't. Surgeons were cut out from a different cloth than I was. It was a tough thing for me to blend in. I was probably the youngest in the room by 20 years. You really have to earn everyone's respect in that room. And maybe it wasn't the best like immediate environment to be in fresh out of school. And it was not a regular 9-to-5 job. It was like I wake up at 5 a.m., drive to the hospital, and I'm coming home around 8 a.m., just bounce around hospital. So it was really grueling, and probably for the better, it didn't work out. And I wanted to put myself in the highest of stakes, no pun intended. Being in the OR, in the medical field, is probably the OR. And I learned a lot. It was great, real awesome exposure. One of the coolest things I did see was an awake craniotomy. And I was like, oh, there's some doctors who worked in profession for many, many years, like decades, who haven't seen one. I think I saw 2 during my time, 2 or 3.
Can you tell me what that is?
So an awake craniotomy, no lineups were built during these, but the person's awake while they're getting surgery done with their brain exposed.
Wow. Okay.
So
they can't be put under for this surgery?
No, because they have to monitor certain senses and sensory to make sure everything is going right. So you'll see, I'm sure you can see this on YouTube. They'll have like PowerPoint presentations, making sure they can notice what's coming up on the PowerPoint presentation. So little things like that were really eye-opening. And I luckily, still in the training phase, I had a preceptor who was guiding me through it, but I was like blown away by that. And then it was like quickly, I was like, yeah, I'm not really cut out for this. I did really want to be a surgeon if I did go to medical school, and it just wasn't meant to be. And it's just one of those things where you look back and I was like, maybe for the better, and didn't work out. My parents obviously were really upset and devastated being an only child, but we've worked it out since then.
All right, so you started DFS. You did a little stint in the OR, and this is still like your second year in DFS, so you still haven't had any like 5-figure wins yet, because you said you didn't have any until about 4 years in. So tell me about the progression from there. So you were successful. I mean, you say you weren't successful right away, but you were a winning player right away. You're getting $10.99, so that's at least $600 won. So you were at least having some success. At this point, were you moving into DFS as a profession? Like, was it after the OR stint? Was this like your primary source of income?
Yeah, I definitely explored some other avenues. I did teach kids at night at a teaching center just to get some income living in Chicago. I had some buddies who were very kind. Where when I first moved to Chicago, you're living check to check, living in a big city, and some of the friends who I moved in with were my roommates from college, and they were like, "Can you just stay with us?" Because we were all really close, and we were like young kids, so we like set up like a living arrangement in the living room, as ridiculous as this sounds, but I think like a Manhattan style living room style where you got like a bed in the living room and just like sharing space there. But that was probably the greatest like experience, just to like be with my friends, and like it was like another years of college. But So luckily rent wasn't as high for me, so I could use some money playing DFS. And I did struggle for a little bit. It was like by getting a 1099, I was getting $1,000 1099s. I think my first one was like $700, and the next one was like $800. So this is like not enough money to really even get like pay off a gym membership in the city.
Right.
This is just like some extra money. And I really was just like always consuming content. I was like a content whore, just like still am. I listened to everything that was out there, but I always had a feeling that if I had some sort of bankroll, I could be successful. But there were so many times where I was like, I'm just gonna stop playing. This is it. Like, it's really frustrating where like you're playing 50-50s, you win everything, lose everything. And for the next 2-3 years, I still just building one lineup. And then I want to say the fall of 2018 is where I was like, all right, let's just really delve in. And the fall of 2018 is really key for the site as well. That is when Awesemo.com acquires a previously site known as FanVice. And I think this was pretty key. But in between this period, I had also met Alex at a live final event that I crashed. FanDuel was like, hey, do you want to crash this live final event?
FanDuel just invited you? Like
it was in Chicago, and it was actually a block away from where I was living. It was
funny.
at a bar called Sluggers. But I met them the day before we were playing. They had like a pickup basketball game, and I went to that. And I met. It's funny to say this is 2017. I want to say this is the summer of 2017. I met Alex. I met Tom Kennedy. I met Petty Theft. These are the three guys who I remember meeting all at this thing. And I was like young. I was 21, 22 years old. And I remember asking Tom at the time, and I was like, yeah, do you make more money playing DFS than you are as a lawyer? I just straight up asking him. I was like, no shyness. I was just like, he's like, yeah, I do. I was like, what? I just blew my mind that people were making this type of money then. But me and Alex were friendly. I knew Alex's name a lot because he was playing WNBA DFS. And that's something that I was trying to grind out because I figured it was a little soft and I had some success there. And then he told me later on he had season tickets. So we would go to season tickets, Chicago Sky games together.
Nice.
And it was lucky enough on the Chicago Red Line, I get to pick his mind about DFS and little things like that. And it was really valuable to me. I didn't have much of a bankroll then. 2018 comes around. I get more success because I got better with bankroll management. I got better with contest selection at the time. And it's as crazy as it sounds, you have to just try different things out when you're learning. It's people can tell you one thing, but DFS can be played / solved in different ways to each person. And for me, it was just, I guess, finding the right contest for me. And it happened to be on Yahoo. That's where I finally saw some success.
And those are GPPs on Yahoo, I assume?
Yes, because they had no management fees. I didn't even understand rake for the first couple of years. And I just was like playing like a true casual guy on the couch, like type of player. It's like, all right. And there's something to a confidence level factor of seeing first place next to your username, which you don't get to see that much if you're playing the large field GPPs, but Yahoo had small size GPPs. I was like, wow, I'm coming first in this a lot more often than I ever have. I was been able to build up a bankroll on Yahoo. It was awesome. Like just getting that confidence factor is really key. And then understanding that if you're going to look at this over a long period of time, it can pay off. And then I just started applying different things I learned on Yahoo to FanDuel. But granted, I had been playing on FanDuel and DraftKings at lower stakes.
Okay.
But it was Yahoo's where I first saw success and confidence to really boost my abilities to play, I think.
And when you were getting first place on Yahoo, what kind of first place prize were you getting there? I mean, aside from the confidence boost, I assume you're winning some money at least.
Yeah, it was no management fee. Sometimes they had different contests. Even if it was $250 just winning is a lot. It was a lot to me at the time. A lot of money.
Depending on
it still is. So I'll still take first place $250. First place, there's a ring to first place that is just awesome. And I think it was like $250. Sometimes it was $500. And I think they started growing their price on their DFS product a bit more there. I think I had probably my first 4-figure win on Yahoo potentially. Looking back at it, I don't remember where, but it might have been in Yahoo, or if it wasn't on Yahoo, it was on DraftKings NBA Summer League, where I would study everything about Summer League and just know all the players. And I still do that just because I love the NBA. I just love absolutely everything about the NBA.
All right, I feel like I need to break in here. I was going to save this for later. We have some listener cues, but since you brought up Summer League, I got a good question from Jake Anderson. He wanted you to address the accusations that you cheat in NBA Summer League DFS. There have been some accusations that you maybe call in and get the lineups from the coaches. Is this true? Tell me why do you know the lineup so nobody else does? I assume you must be cheating, right?
Shout out to Jake Anderson. He's a good buddy of mine in OG who we had similar timelines of success. We both started from the ground up and really worked not work together in the sense like we would brainstorm together ideas about NBA Summer League. And he's one of the other guys who I really am friendly with on Twitter and whatnot. So NBA Summer League, there's a lack of information there where if you really put in the work of what players are in the Summer League, what type of profile they have. So before the Summer League starts, NBA rosters release every player who's on a Summer League roster. So I'll go through every single Summer League roster and kind of study what type of player they are. Sometimes I know the player based on like college pedigree. Sometimes they're former NBA players who are coming back. But the thing is, it's about once you get the news, you got to be quick to adapt to what's happening. There's no real optimizers, there's no projections. And where I found success is I'm okay running 150 lineups with the same lineup in NBA Summer League and just duping myself. And there were many times where my 150 lineups are in the top 10 and it's a unique lineup where I'm going from third place to 153rd. I think that happened 3 or 4 times this Summer League, where it's an awful playing experience for the one guy who's building one lineup and he just sees 150 lineups of this insane person just playing that same lineup and players that you have no idea there are. But it's not that I get the information as quick as anyone else, but I just know where I'm looking for the information, that being beat reporters, that being NBA.com. So I understand where the information is coming from. I know how to get ready to put quickly on my feet, building one lineup. I'm good to go. And that's why people got annoyed this past summer about my success.
I didn't realize you were building 150 trains. Yeah, that would be frustrating as a guy who's like, I'm in first place winning, I don't know, $10,000, whatever it is for Summer League. And then suddenly you're not winning anything because you get passed by the RynPak train. I can see why that's frustrating, but yeah, so no real cheating going on there. Jake didn't want me to go. He wanted me to really push the issue, not go easy on you too much, but I guess I think I'm satisfied. I'm sorry, Jake. There's nothing more I can really ask about this.
I know why Jake's upset because he probably came 154th. That's probably why he's upset.
Poor Jake. I do feel bad for Jake. All right, so we're building up to leading up to you getting involved with Awesemo, but we're not quite there yet. So you're grinding Summer League. This is still before you know Alex at this point. You're still grinding DFS to the point where you started grinding Summer League. So you had some success at Summer League NBA Summer League DFS. Tell me about your progression from there. So you had some success in Summer League. Then did you bring that into the NFL season, or how did you progress from there? And how did you get involved with Awesemo ultimately?
So for the first couple of years of just playing DFS, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I acted like a know-it-all. I thought I knew everything about it. I really did. I didn't know shit, to be honest with you. And DFS is something that will humble you really fast. And I didn't have success in NFL right off the bat. It's really a frustrating sport. And it still kind of is, especially this past season at different times. But no, I mean, ups and downs. But what I started to do is get away from my own bias and my own feel towards building one lineup, and really trusting data, incorporating data into my process. That finally started happening in 2018. The fall of 2018, the winter of 2018, where I was like, okay, let me just get, I know how to look at numbers, understand numbers, and let's find the balance in this. And then that things really did take off then.
So what kind of data sources were you looking at, if you don't mind me asking? Because this is before Awesemo was around. So what were you looking at that point?
Awesemo was around at this point. Okay. Awesemo was around in 2018 fall. But I was looking at projections, not really ownership projections at the time. I was still trying to figure out projections, how I can use it to my abilities, how I can use my own intuition in these projections. And finding that balance of where it's not too extreme, where I'm finding the balance, how to apply this consistently over time. And then using these projections, I started using an optimizer in Fantasy Cruncher. Where like, okay, this is what the quote unquote optimal lineup based off projections look like. How can I make good lineups based off this optimal, but not being exactly that, where I'm still giving my chance to win. And it took me 3.5 years to figure this out. It's just like the really sad part about it. I wish I'd figured this out right off the bat. But it took me that long to figure that out. And it's not to say I was like, okay, I was having bigger wins more often. Not to say I was winning more, but I just having bigger wins more often, which is what you want. And That's just being more informed to data, applying the data day in and day out, looking at different strategies that I thought could work for NBA. And also, I do think my NBA intuition does give me a little bit of advantage because I understand the ins and outs of what a rotation might look like at night to night based on potential matchups, defensive schemes at times.
And where do you think that comes from? Do you watch a lot of basketball? Are you looking at Basketball Monster or the popcorn machine? Or what kind of tools are you using to gain this knowledge? Or is it just your experience with DFS and tracking games?
Yeah, so I actually don't use like popcorn machine, or I think the other one's like NBA Wower by Add More Funds. I don't use any of that. I watch a metric fuck ton of basketball.
Okay.
I watch a ton of basketball. I am just reading up on like different what beat reporters are saying. I am just a basketball savant, I guess. I just like try to suck in as much information.
Do you have a favorite team?
I grew up a hardcore Pistons fan up until they traded Chauncey Billups, and they kind of sucked since then. But I do think Cade Cunningham looks promising. So I was a hardcore Pistons fan. And one thing DFS has done, it's funny you bring that up, I've given up a lot of my personal fandom through it. And ironically, to say that, it's been fine. I'm okay with it. Like growing up, the Tigers were good, and they were in the LCS World Series. They were good up until they traded Justin Verlander, and I like stopped caring about them. And so little things like that. Lions have always sucked. I'm not really a Lions fan. I don't really embrace them. But if the Lions do go to the Super Bowl, maybe I'll go. But looking at that process of just like incorporating more data and like information, it's really important nowadays where everything has gone to a more automated, more info-driven world. The information out there is really good. And everyone knows that. And trying to apply that to the best of your abilities is really important, because otherwise you're going to just fall behind, which wasn't the case, I want to say, let alone 2.5 years ago.
Yeah, it's gotten a lot better even recently. Okay, so it's largely just watching basketball for you. So you're kind of similar to Travis Betty in some ways. It seems like he's, kind of similar in that you both just have your pulse on the rotations, and that's kind of where you find a lot of your edge in NBA. Would you agree with that?
I mean, I don't want to put myself in the realm of petty theft. Petty theft's on his own mountain. He's a killer NBA DFS player. Probably in terms of NBA, he's second to none. He's been great for a really, really long time, and I've really enjoyed my conversations with him. And we've had conversations about NBA together. Yeah, he knows NBA really, really well, and I do think it helps. And where, in the sense, when it helps, I don't want to speak for him, but sometimes you can quote unquote expose models, that being ownership models, exposing projection models, to give you that edge for that specific slate or specific night. But for the longest time, just talking about NBA, when they brought back late swap, that's when things took off for me, because I really knew how to late swap quick, really fast, within like, I want to say a couple of minutes, where without late swap, I don't think I'm a profitable NBA DFS player. And I don't know. I don't think we'll know. I really find that hard for me to believe. Maybe I've had success in Showdown single game. Maybe I would be, but because there's no late swap in that process. But in NBA Classic, NBA Main Slate, FanDuel, DraftKings, Yahoo, late swap is really important. And how to apply that really fast is what quote unquote edge is left. Otherwise, people are more times than not who are using data are putting out really good lineups nowadays.
Let me take a moment away from this conversation with RynPak to tell you about our sponsor, NoHost Advantage. NoHost Advantage is bringing you a different way to enjoy DFS with player props contests. It's 100% peer-to-peer to help level the playing field, and offers over 500 player props, with all new users getting a $25 deposit bonus with promo code Awesemo, that's AWESEMO. NoHost Advantage has mass entry capability and big prize pools. Beat your friends, not the house. Use our NoHost Advantage projections and optimal lineup tool to help you take down big prizes. Download in the App Store or play on nohostadvantage.com. I'm trying to figure out where to incorporate. Do we want to talk process right now? Because I kind of want to talk about your background with Awesemo first. I do want to get into that, into your late swap process. Let's keep going with the path we're on, and talk about you getting involved with Awesemo, and then really dive into your process, because this is really fascinating to me. I really want to talk about your late swap process and your NBA edge. But let's start with, so you knew Alex, and in 2018 you're having success in football and you're having a lot of success with NBA, just kind of based on your knowledge of the sport and your utilization of late swap maybe better than most people do. At what point do you get involved with Awesemo?
Yeah, so this is I think things get pretty good, and probably a key point in my life when I do get involved in Awesemo. So this is 2018 wraps up. 2019, Awesemo is growing really rapidly. They're putting out great shows, and I had become friendly with former colleague Fast Eddie Fear, who I was friendly with. I had met Tom and Alex beforehand. They were a small site at the time. And then Fast Eddie Fear is like, hey, I'm going to this River North Starbucks, meeting up with Tom. And we were just talking about the site. Tom was just asking me about my experience as a subscriber, what I enjoyed. And he was just asking, what's your experiences with social media? I've always been a Twitter guy. There was a time before, nowadays I don't tweet as much, but there was times where I was tweeting 10, 15 times a night about the NBA. This is like when I was an undergrad. So I've toned down drastically, but there was a time where I used to tweet a lot. But I knew a lot of things about DFS, like what was happening in the quote unquote industry. And he's like, I think later in the week, it's like, hey, would you be willing to come on part-time to work us on the social media? And I have no marketing experience, but I understand DFS. I know DFS pretty well. I was like, yeah, I mean, I've always respect Alex and Tom quite a bit. And if I guess Fast Eddie Fear knocked on the door, Tom let me in, and it's kind of been, I've rode with it since. If Tom doesn't give me the opportunity, I really find it hard to believe I take DFS even more seriously to the next level. Because like once you put yourself in the environment of guys who have been so successful for so long, at the time, I think Alex and Tom were both like the most like successful players, one of the most successful players. But I was like, all right, I want to belong. I want to belong to be like respected inside. I just don't want to be like, I want to earn my own respect. And I was slowly like building up their Twitter. At the time when I joined, I think our Twitter had 5,000 followers, but I've helped with their marketing strategy efforts, that being YouTube descriptions, like YouTube, like sponsors, promos, like I've worked on that, trying to grow other platforms. So I guess quote unquote, anything related to some sort of marketing strategy, social media strategy, little things like that. But the company has grown massive. At the time when I joined the site, there was a small WeWork office. There was 4 desks, and I was sitting at one of the desks. And the company is huge now, huge tech team, and the company has gone on to do great things. So I do owe a lot to Tom to give me the chance, because I don't think I take DFS more seriously. Where I was like, oh, I want to be good at this even more. Have that drive leading up to it. So that's how it started. Okay. I've still been around since then. But
so are you the guy sending out from the Awesemo handle, the engagement farming tweets? Is that you?
No, I don't do those. That is colleague Joey Corman, who is the director of social.
Who I hear is a big liar. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
All I'm hearing on the whenever Greg and Eric do shows, they're talking about how Joey Corman cheats at some game that they play. I have no idea. I don't track it that closely. It's just a funny.
Greg and Eric do definitely give Joey Corman a tough time. That's funny that's brought up. But no, I'm part-time at the company. As I haven't been full-time, but I definitely do join on different strategic initiatives with them, talk about what things can be improved on the back end. So it's an awesome experience for me. It's like a passion project. It's been a ton of fun.
Yeah. All right. So before we move on, I really want to talk about your process. But first, we were talking before the show, and Mike was going to put up on the screen that you're a DFS professional, and you said, no, I'm not a DFS professional. So I'm curious why it is. Do you not consider yourself a DFS professional? Where do you draw that line? How do you define being a professional, or what's your bugaboo about being called a DFS professional?
So I don't call myself a DFS professional. I call myself a competitive DFS player. It's always been a hobby for mine that has accelerated to like heights that I never would have thought of. I mean, if you were to tell me in 2015, hey, I'm going to be doing a high stakes episode talking about my success in DFS, I'd be saying, hell no way in chance. But I just don't see there. The term professional, competitive, you can flip a coin, whatever. I don't call myself a professional because I look at it as a hobby. And it's not like, the thing about DFS, what makes it really interesting, if you look at it as a job, if you look at a job, it's like probably the only job outside if you're running a business where you're going to lose money a lot. You're going to lose money on more nights than not. And I try to explain this to my buddy who's in sales, be like, hey, each sales email you send and each email that you don't get a reply back, imagine if you're losing money. And it's just like a way to look at it DFS wise, where I just look at myself, I'm like competitive, enjoy it as a hobby. It's a little more like less relaxing, less stressful. I was in grad school also, so it was a lot easier to tell people I was a student. And I just don't call myself a DFS professional. I just say I'm competitive. But if you want to say, I do think drawing the line of like, hey, once you're a professional, like playing the highest of high stakes, I think that's fine. Or you pass you get the 4 badges on FanDuel maybe, or you pass the minimum profit on FanDuel, or you pass the $1 million entry fee on DK. If you want to draw the line, sure. I'm not going to argue with you about it, but I just call myself a competitive DFS player. Maybe you can call me a professional, sure, but I'll just call myself a competitive one.
I mean, so by my stance, so here's where I define it. When I quit my day job to do DFS full time, that's when I decided. That's when I started calling myself a DFS professional. Prior to that, I was a lawyer. Like that was my job, was doing this law job. That was my profession. DFS was my hobby, where I'm making more money than my profession. But then it's kind of a silly line. But then when I quit my job, I was like, okay, now I'm a DFS professional. So by my standards, you are a DFS professional because it is not just your primary source of income, but I would say the primary thing that you do for money, right? Like you don't make enough doing your minimal amount of content at Awesemo to sustain your life. So from my perspective,
I guess that's one way to look at your primary source of income is your profession. Yeah, that's definitely fine. I think that's a great way to look at it.
It's all arbitrary.
Wouldn't it also just be easier for you to tell people that you're an attorney?
It might be, yes. I hate talking about what I do, and especially like when people are like, "Oh, I see you quit your job. What are you doing now?" And I don't want to try to explain this because people don't know. Some people look down on it. Some people are super into it, but it's sort of hard 100%. To explain. My
parents look. I'm an only child. My parents hate it. Look down upon it. The only way to get them on the other side is tell them that you want $100,000 and be like, okay, that's one way to get them to be back on it. And then the last, you haven't won $100,000 in a while. I was like, hey, this is not like an everyday type of thing.
So in that case, so you're not calling yourself a DFS professional. What do you tell people you do? If people ask you like, what do you do professionally?
So in my time I work, obviously I have a couple of different gigs. There's DFS that takes up some time. I make content that takes up some time. I also work with healthcare. I work with the healthcare VC to invest in early stage healthcare startups, which applies to what I went to school for. And that makes the conversation sweet and short. And I also, I really don't care if people find out I play DFS. I mean, it's not something I like rambunctiously am telling people I am playing DFS. I'll do it when I want to and when I feel like it. It's not something that I need to share a screenshot. I don't need to do any of that. I don't feel any motivation or need for me to do that. So I usually tell people I just recently graduated grad school. I work with a healthcare VC, and I also help out with some marketing strategy efforts for a content site, and keeps things short, sweet. And if people who know me really well, like my inner circle, then if they ask about DFS, I'll bring it up. But it's not something that I go out of my way to be telling people. If I bring it up, cool, it is what it is, but I like to keep things on the low with the public perspective, just because A, it's hard to explain, B, do they really care, and C, there is that negative cloud that can go over it where you don't want people to think, hey, Neil's a gambler like on a daily basis. Sure, yes, technically by term maybe we are, but do you really want people to go out and be saying that? Maybe not.
Negative connotations. Yep. All right. Now, so I really do want to talk about your process. We kind of cut it short earlier just because I really want to dive into a lot of different aspects of your process. So you say that you have, it sounds like a pretty good grasp of computer programming, but it sounds like you don't really do a lot of your own simulations. Is that correct?
So simulations is a funny word, especially in DFS these days. It's a buzzword nowadays. Right. And simulations are great. I think simulations are awesome, data-driven decision points. A lot of the tools based on decided data-driven, but a simulation can be driven down to even a guy writing an article of what a potential NFL game script might look like. That's a simulation because he's simulating an outcome, what he thinks might happen. So by that term, yes, simulations are part of my process. I do try to think of different game scripts, but am I automating a ton of simulations? Not all the time. It really depends on how much time I have in the day to really drive it down. Sometimes it's necessary, sometimes it's not. If you had the unlimited time to make a slate, like an NBA DFS slate, let's say you have like 6 months to just focus on one slate. Yeah, will I be doing a ton of simulations? Probably. But we're not living in that world. We're living in a world where news is evolving. news and notes are evolving, just projections are evolving, data is evolving throughout a short period of time where you only have so much time to work with, and then you just have to be efficient in that time period.
Okay, so it is something that you have the capability of doing at least, and you do it sometimes. It's just a matter of it, especially with NBA, like you just usually don't have the time to be running simulations as news is coming in closer to lock. And obviously, if you're as Brian Hooper pointed out to me, if you do a crunch, a fantasy cruncher with any amount of randomness, that is technically a simulation. It's not what I think of when I think of simulations, but as you mentioned, yeah, that is technically a simulation. So I guess if you're using any kind of randomness on fantasy cruncher, you are technically running simulations.
Yeah, for sure. And I think maybe, I guess your iteration or definition of simulation is someone who is programming. If the slate were to happen a million different times, what is the outcome that's going to happen? And then you derive whatever your lineup portfolio from there, right? I'm assuming that's what you mean by simulation. And I do think that is very valuable to use. And a lot of successful players do that. You can, I think if you can see, you probably understand the players who are probably doing that. There are different ways to study that.
Yep.
But with news evolving so quickly, especially in NBA, you can definitely use that to your advantage. But I don't think you can do it to the best of your abilities with the time given.
Okay. I know you use an optimizer. We talked about you use Fantasy Cruncher. Do you use Fantasy Cruncher for like every lineup that you make for every sport, or do you have other ways of making lineups? Do you hand build sometimes? How often are you using Fantasy Cruncher?
So I will. I more times than not, if I'm building many lineups, I'm using Fantasy Cruncher. I do think it's a great product of getting your lineups out done efficiently and being able to customize to your own preferences. That being groups, that being player. I mean, obviously projections being one, and then you just having the data up there is great. I will hand build certain lineups. I will hand build probably if I'm at a live final, I'll hand build a live final lineup. I'll hand build if I have like a high stakes, like just one entry. If I'm just playing one entry in a day, I'll probably just hand build that. Because I've hand built for so long, I still have like the soft spot in my heart. Like I still think I'm a hand builder at heart, but things have changed since then. And I do think an optimizer is very beneficial if you want to build a lot of lineups. And it's really hard to get away nowadays with everyone's data being so strong. You can use data key points to build like a lineup by hand and have great success at it. And so many nights you see a guy with just a single bullet winning. And I have one with a single bullet, thankfully, fortunately. But it's really hard. It's really hard.
Yeah, it definitely is. So you keep referencing that projections are really good and that you like to be able to see the projections. Do you ever do your own projections from scratch? Because this is something that it seems to me. So I was saying that you in some ways are similar to Travis Petty. You don't want to put yourself on that same pedestal, but just in like the process, to some extent, you're benefiting from your knowledge of the sport, from your understanding of rotations and stuff. So it might be useful for someone like you who has a good understanding of these things to build your own projections. Is that something that you ever do from scratch?
Not all the way from the start to finish. I will use a baseline to see what is out there. And then I'll just, splash my own NBA intuition into it. And that being like looking at how I can change up the minutes for certain players, that being blowouts. And I'm probably in a minority. I'm okay with projecting blowouts. And I think that's fine. I'm okay doing that. I'm okay dying on that hill. Some players are not, which is
again
fine.
Similar to Travis Petty. Another way, as something he said, is that he is always projecting blowouts. He says, that there's always a possibility of blowouts, so that goes into his projection. So another way that you are a similar player.
Yeah, I think it's completely fine. And the Vegas spread is something the most indicative of any type of result, right? That's what we look at, or the betting odds, whatever you look at. It's probably the best way to, I guess we use that as a baseline as well for blowouts or whatnot. I think I personally am okay with it. And I look at defensive matchups just to see who might be guarding who for projected amount of time, just to see what players have the least path of resistance to be successful every single night. I try to understand which players have that every single night. And that's from watching data, looking at data, looking at ownership, and try to have that holistic review on a slate night in and night out.
Okay. And do you do your own ownership projections, or are you using those from Awesemo or other sources?
And no one's beating. I mean, I'm sure people might have better ownership projections than Awesemo, but they're as good as it gets. I mean, if you come to me, you have better ownership projections, I'll definitely entertain them. I'm happy to take a look at them, but they're as good as they get. I mean, they're really awesome just to be able to incorporate that into the next level, the boom bust and all that has been really revolutionary. It has made it has made players really good at DFS. And
Yeah,
it's just, it is what it is. As data evolves, players get better, and that's how things go.
that's how things go. Yeah. So I'm curious to hear what kind of player you consider yourself. So this is a discussion that I've had with several of my recent guests, the game theory optimal versus exploitative style. So I would consider myself an exploitative style, which is for the listeners, that's like if you look at you figure out which players are under-owned relative to their chance of success, and you try to exploit them being under-owned by going above the field and even above where you think they should be, if everything was efficient, to try to exploit where the field is playing too little of a player. And then obviously the inverse as well. If the field is playing too much of a player, then I play less of that player than I think that they should be owned at. Whereas game theory optimal, or as Nerdy Tenor calls it, balanced, would be you're playing just exactly, he runs simulations to figure out exactly the amount that a player should be in lineups, their chances of being optimal, and he plays them exactly at that level. So I've had these discussions with a lot of the top pros, how they consider themselves as players. Do you consider yourself either an exploitative or balanced player, or do you have a kind of a different style? How would you describe your type of play?
Probably say more of the balance type of thing, but that took me 3.5, 4, almost 4 years to figure it out. As I was hand building lineups, I was getting lost in the shuffle of trying to be perfect, trying to build that perfect lineup night in and night out, and forgetting that DFS is a peer-to-peer thing. You're peer-to-peer. It's different than sports betting. I completely was blind to that. You're trying to beat everyone else. You're not trying to be perfect. It's something that took me a long time to understand that and apply to. A lot of times when I was building lineups, I wouldn't have much chalk. I'd have a bunch of guys sub 5% owned, trying to be perfect. And that's where I got lost in the shuffle. And then when I moved to more of the balance, using more data, trying to use ownership as a baseline to see what quote unquote I think is good ownership. A lot of times in NBA, the ownership is justified, and even so more nowadays. And yeah, I think more in the balance build. And going back to what I said earlier, really tough to build out simulations. Nerdy Tenor probably makes it look like saying the alphabet. And I've heard his process. It's pretty surreal, and that's the competition. That will be the competition in years to come, and it's something that all players who want to be successful for foreseeable future need to incorporate to a certain extent at times, I think, because it's going to be tough to beat a process like that.
Yep, for sure. All right, so you're more of a game theory optimal type player. Do you consider ownership projections? I mean, it sounds like you do. You at least factor in ownership projections to some extent. Am I wrong in saying that? You look like you're maybe questioning whether that's true. Do you factor in ownership when you're making your lineups, or are you just trying to make the best projected lineups or the best portfolio of lineups that you can without factoring it in?
I'm more in line with the portfolio. There are times where maybe this off season I need to prepare myself to incorporate ownership a bit more and incorporate more leverage in mine. Historically, I need to get better at that just to give myself a chance to win more often. Mm-hmm. That's something that's with the lack of time that I have in the day, I don't use as much, which is kind of probably going to sound like kind of shocking to people. Probably it's something that I need to incorporate more. I don't incorporate it enough, I think, to put myself in to be more successful. So that's something that I need to work on. I don't use it that much, to be honest with you. And it's something that I need to work on. And you could look at what projected ownership, and I'll have an idea of what that might look like. Just also, if for some reason that ownership projection is wrong, you're really screwing yourself over.
Yeah.
And not only if it's wrong, with NBA news evolving as it does, that ownership projection at 655 means I think honestly shit if there's someone's
sure.
ruled out at 701. So I try to just look at that's another variable where I'm probably going to be wrong more often than not with the news evolving. So I try to back off of it a little bit. Now there are sports where you probably should be looking at ownership a lot more, albeit golf. I think that's one way to look at it. It's a sport that's highly variant, where probably some guys are way too heavily owned, and with pricing being so efficient, you can definitely find leverage like that. But sport like NBA, where news is on the fly, we're chatting right now in the afternoon, we might get one news now, which might be the biggest news of the day, but that might mean shit come like 10 minutes from now because we'll get someone else ruled out or ruled in based on a situation like that.
So we've been talking a lot about NBA. Would you say that NBA is the sport that you have the biggest edge in DFS, or is it some other sport that we haven't talked about?
Yeah, NBA by far.
Okay.
It's my most successful sport, and not by leaps and bounds. Maybe leaps and bounds. I have to look at my roto tracker, but NBA has been pretty fortunately and very lucky to be been really awesome to me over the past couple of years.
Yeah, I was looking at your RotoGrinders profile a little bit, and I was a little surprised to see how many other sports you have had success in. I mean, I knew that you were successful in other sports. I've seen you at the top of leaderboards as well, but I think of you as being, NBA first, and then you're a great player in other sports, but NBA, you just crush the field. You have wins. It seems regularly every season. It seems like you're always near the top or winning tournaments. So where would you say that edge comes from in NBA?
Probably it does help just like understanding my own intuition, like year over year, just being on top of obviously NBA offseason player movement just happening. What might things look like come the fall? Understanding potential game plan, matchups. It's the whole holistic thing of just being just a big fan of NBA. And maybe if I were to delve in like that in other sports, I thought about it like, if I was a diehard NFL fan, would things be like that? Maybe, but there's like NFL is so difficult to look at it because technically there's 18 weeks plus showdown now, so there's a lot more slates where I've had great success in NFL. I mean, I've had success there, but maybe if NFL was a sport every night like NBA, maybe I'll understand. Maybe the results.
You just have the bigger sample size with NBA to see your success over time.
And I also just, there was times where I think 2 years ago, I knew every single player on every single roster in the NBA. That's how much I'm a fan of it. That's like, I just know what to expect. And I'm more than willing to take a flyer on a guy, the ninth guy on a rotation, a potential blowout than the rest of the field is.
So are you crushing Podol then? Or Pirtle, I think it's pronounced.
Yeah, I probably would do really well in the Pirtle game. Yeah.
You haven't been playing it though?
No. I mean,
too easy.
It's tough to play when there's no six figures up top in a contest, right? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, what's the point? You're right. You're right. All right. So biggest edge in NBA, and you think that it's largely just due to your understanding of the sport, your intuitions. What does your typical process look like for NBA? Like when do you start your work for the day? Assuming that you're not doing a show for Awesemo, I know that can kind of change things up a lot if you're going to be on like the deeper dive or live before lock. If you're not doing a show, when would you say you start your process? And of course, you're always doing the slate starter too, but so maybe it changes things anyway. But anyway, in general, how does your process look if you're not doing, say, one of the shows leading up to lock?
If I'm not looking at one of the shows leading up to lock, it does start with the NBA slate starter. The slate winds down. Potential injuries might have happened or any sort of what might happen tomorrow. You just try to the slate starter is just to get your mind running. It's that warm up lap for the next day is how I look at it. Just to get your feet wet. It's like kind of like the table setter for the rest of the day. I enjoy the show just to get my feet wet. Just helps with me with my process, just to look at pricing inefficiencies. What Vegas, none of the Vegas lines aren't out, but I'll look at whatever ones are out, and I'll look at I just saw Devin Booker sprained his ankle. What would that mean if Phoenix is on a back-to-back, or if someone who's got hurt a lot this past season, like the guys who were always questionable. Jimmy Butler was always questionable this season. Like you have to deal with that again. So just like getting yourself already just thinking in your mind different scenarios of injury news. And then I'll look at maybe Vegas lines in the morning. I really don't touch anything till I'm going to say about 75 minutes till before lock. And then this is where my process gets pretty, wild. I play regularly on 4 sites every day. And I've done this part of my routine ever since, I want to say 2018, 2019, it's been a process of mine. And I don't care if I'm only playing $250 on one site or like a lot less volume than FanDuel and DraftKings. For me, it's like, I just have to do it. It's just like, I have to do this every day. It probably, looking back at it, probably has helped out. Maybe sometimes I do miss the CSV upload that we talked about, but I go through site by site, get all my stuff ready for 4 sites.
Which 4 sites? FanDuel, DraftKings, Yahoo, SuperDraft?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And sometimes there was a 5th site in Fantasy Draft that I was doing 5 sites, and I want to say the 2020 NBA bubble, and they closed out right before that season, NFL season. So I was doing 5 sites, pretty like full on every single night. just looking through everything, just getting everything ready to go. I would do that every single day. I still do foresights whenever I can. More times than not I do, and it's just a process of mine. Just for me, there are some months where Yahoo will be the month that carries me, and I just want to give myself the pathway of just like, all right, if things go really bad, there might be a site that just carries me, just like how variance works out in DFS.
Yeah.
So there will be months where FanDuel carries me. There will be months that DK carries me. So for me, it's really important, and I really make sure it's a priority to just get it out there on 4 sites, because it gives you a potential to solve 4 different puzzles. And in talking about portfolio, you are now diversifying your portfolio among 4 sites. Now, I do not recommend it. It's a cluster of a mind where you're processing different things, ownership for different things, and there are instances where you can mix things up, where the automation aspect of it, which I have lacked. I don't have my process is a little bit more manual than it needs to be, where I don't think I can automate it to be successful. So that's something I need to work on.
You were telling me, I think it was before the show, that you mentioned that you screw up your CSVs all the time and you end up with like no lineups or trains of lineups. Is that something that happens like on a monthly basis?
The goal of mine this year was to not miss any CSVs this calendar year. It's a lot less than last year, but this year I think I missed a couple. The worst is when you miss them on like a showdown or snow game, because it's either a train or it's just dead. And I'm in like by a dummy lineup, it's like real dummy. Like there are guys who are not in the league in this dummy lineup, and it burns me. And I need to just like sit back, just build a lineup that can compete, and make sure that happens more often. It's just like bad organization. You just forget things when you're playing a lot of slates, and it'll cost you. You don't want to miss a lot, because you'll burn a lot really fast. And I've learned the hard way. The worst is maybe when it has happened in the NFL season, where it just ruins a week, and that's just the worst. But it's something that I'm constantly working on, that organization of getting that better.
Yeah.
And it's with late news, it can be a little tricky at times, but I've gotten much better at it than years past. It's something that's one of my biggest weaknesses, is just getting that CSV in time.
Yeah, no. I mean, it happens to me it's happened to me multiple times in the past week, where I screwed up. Either I forgot that I was playing on FanDuel on a 2-game NBA slate, so I had reserved lineups, and I couldn't enter with 1 game, so that was $1,200 down the drain.
I will share some key advice. There is a prolific player, I will not say their name, but has an alarm set 30 minutes before to get a dummy set of lineups in. I think there are multiple players do that, so that is probably a process that I need to incorporate, even though like news can change in those last 30 minutes. But I think that's something that probably I should incorporate in my process. Just, it doesn't take long to upload the lineup. It's just like bad organization, bad discipline of just not getting that lineup in.
So you said you mentioned 75 minutes. Were you saying that 75 minutes before the slate starts, you start setting up your lineups for the 4 different sites?
Yeah, just starting my quote unquote nightly process. But
okay.
The thing about NBA is you have to be at your computer from 5:45 Eastern to 9:45, 9:55 Eastern to give your the best chance to win. I do think the next evolution in NBA DFS, if they do keep late swap open, which I do hope, is just if people who simulate in contest outcomes based on DraftKings CSVs, which would be the next evolution, which would not to say ruin the game, but it would be a wild thing to I've thought about it. That's like, I was like, could I do this? Would it be worth it? I'm not sure. It's tough to invest that amount of time, and like if you don't have a good process down, it can really burn you. So it would require a lot of back testing to figure out. The one thing in NBA DFS I do find myself pretty good at it. The one thing I need to get better at is the NBA high stakes, like the $3 or the 4-figure contest. For when I was building one lineup by hand on FanDuel, I was playing like the $500, and I was doing fine with it. But when I shifted to more of an MME style in 2019, was it 2019? Yes, it was in 2019. No, MME. I started MMEing the 2019 fall, 2020 spring, 2020 winter. Is probably the January, February is when I really started MMEing. But I was playing like the high stakes on FanDuel. I was doing fine. I didn't really dabble in the DraftKings. I haven't been able to find my footing. And probably my goal for next regular season is trying to find my footing there and try to be competitive more nights than not. So that's
I struggle with high stakes across all sports except for MLB. I think I've had a little bit of success, but in general, I have not had a ton of success at high stakes. I've looked through your results. I mean, you've had plenty of success, a lot more than I have at high stakes. So it seems like you're doing well enough, but maybe just not as well as you do at the low stakes stuff. But yeah, I still see that you're doing pretty well at high stakes. At least you've had some big wins there.
Yeah, the thing with high stakes, the swings get even more massive, and that's something that you have to mentally prepare yourself. So
yeah. All right, so you start about 75 minutes before lock. That's surprising. I mean, that's pretty late. That's even later. I mean, I don't start that, but I probably start 15 minutes before you do most days. And for me, it's just because I am listening to content and I don't want to have to listen to it at a full 2x the whole time. So I try to get in there when I can still listen to Deeper Dive Live Before Lock at 1.5x or so on YouTube. Are you consuming content, or are you just, because you have such a good understanding of the teams, the rotations, that kind of stuff, do you feel like you don't really need to consume content? And if you're not doing a show yourself, are you not listening to content, or are you typically?
For NBA DFS content, for me, it's kind of like white noise. I just like have it on in the background.
Okay.
I think I'm completely fine without it. I don't need it. And there is great content, great minds just sharing great insight for people. Majority of people viewing are probably building 1 to 3 lineups. And maybe I don't necessarily agree with the content being shared for guys who are building only 1 to 3 lineups, because what does 37% of player X mean to a guy who's building 1 to 3 lineups? Like, so because I was a 1 lineup builder, and there was content that would tailor to guys like who are building 1 to 3 lineups that I used to consume pretty well when I was a hand builder. But for me, it's white noise. It's great. We have great guys, great minds. I mean, our NBA team is awesome. So I do enjoy the content whenever I do listen to it. I don't necessarily need it or make it part of my process.
Okay. So it's not a huge part of your process. You're typically just shaping your own exposures across the 4 different sites. I mean, that it takes some time to just go through Fantasy Cruncher and figure out how much you want of different players. And are you typically setting like exposure caps to get to those exposures, or do you have different ways that you try to get to exposure that you like with different players?
Not necessarily. I don't necessarily just do exposure caps. Maybe if I need to, for some odd chance, for like an odd slate, for like I really want to just like not deal with 100% of some scrub, and I'll just cap them off like that. And another thing about content, I do think like for some reason the industry has gone very DraftKings heavy and like has ignored like FanDuel content for some reason. I don't understand why. I think FanDuel is it's a fine site to play on, but I think FanDuel is more bankroll friendly for the novice player just because of their contest dollar free entries and contest sizing. So just because it's usually DraftKings is like $20 100K to first, while FanDuel is $9 or maybe $7 100K to first. So there's a huge bankroll disparity between these two sites for that signature contest. So I love the balance of content. So when I try to give content, I try to talk about everything in a short period of time. So I'll make sure to touch on FanDuel and DraftKings whenever I do a show.
That's great of you. So I used to find it really frustrating back when before I started playing higher volume, when I was just doing 5 to 10 lineups. I did find it frustrating that the sites would focus so much on DraftKings and not spend as much time on FanDuel when I had a more limited bankroll, because I was spending more of my money on FanDuel because I could get more lineups into a big contest with a large pool. And of course, now that I'm doing content, I'm falling into the same trap where it's just like, I don't have time to talk about 2 sites really. And most of the audience is playing DraftKings. So I definitely fall into the trap of, when I'm doing content, talking more about DraftKings. So that's probably something that I should fix. And that's good of you to keep those players in mind, because it is important. You know, when you're starting off, usually you want to play on FanDuel. It's a little bit softer there, and typically the buy-in for the largest contests are a little bit cheaper.
For sure. And the reason why it's softer, because their contest size are 60,000 entries sometimes. I think tonight's 60,000 entries. And when there's more entries, it's a softer field. Just natural numbers for you. And while on everyone's obvious, a lot of the successful people are using optimizers, 150 lineups, where things can get a little difficult. And that's why people have overreactions to certain ownerships, because the contest size is bigger. And ownership projections are really hard to predict. I think they're a good baseline. They're never going to be point on accurate, just like an NBA median projection. It's never going to be point on accurate. So it's a great baseline, a great approach to like have that in your process. So just making sure you have the right insight for the right site is really helpful.
Okay. So you just mentioned that you feel like you need to be at your computer from 5:45 Eastern until basically a lock of the last NBA game. And we were starting to talk about late swap a little bit earlier, how you feel. You were saying that you don't think you would be necessarily a successful NBA DFS player without late swap. Like that is where you find the biggest edge. What does your late swap process look like?
Usually I will, there are multiple ways to approach this. Sometimes you have scenarios and projections ready to go if certain players are out. Mm-hmm. And our Awesemo does a great job of getting the projections out literally seconds after news breaks. Sometimes I do think people rely on certain news sources, news notifications, but there are times where I'm minutes ahead of the news source in a break because I have like a list of beat reporters and projections and alerts ready to go where I know quite a couple minutes I'm willing to take that risk if that's like not the quote unquote official news break. So I'm willing to take that risk if I know which player is going to be in or which player is going to be out. And I just am willing to be very aggressive with late swapping. And sometimes I don't give myself enough flexibility, and it's an evolving process, and sometimes people don't know what to do with the player that's being inserted into the rotation, how they map out. And this goes back to like playing Summer League, playing NBA preseason. I understand what the player profile prototype is and like how he might fit in with this offense, and just applying my intuition a little bit more. I'm willing to take more risk than anything. And for me in DFS, I think the more risk you take, the higher reward you are obviously going to be able to get. But obviously it can go the other way. The more risk, the more damage you can take on your night. Yeah. So it's all about that, giving yourself to boom when things go right? You want to be able to win everything when things are right. So I do think that late swap process and being willing to take some chances on certain players where, more importantly, in late swapping, I'm willing to play players that other people aren't willing to play. So that's just how I approach it.
And is that where you would be more likely to use your own projections? Like when you're late swapping, if like say you say that sometimes you get the news before the major sites will, so probably before Awesemo is updating their projections, do you sometimes go in and do your own projections?
It's sometimes, it's not all the time. It's not like I have some hierarchy like me setting. It's like if the beat reporter tweets something out, and there are obviously we have aggregated news information, us being one of them, and then obviously the notable one is Underdog NBA. They just drive so much of the quote unquote, oh, news broke here notification. Rightfully so, they do a great job. And that just drives it. But if you have the news 2 minutes ahead and it's 8:55 versus 8:55 versus 8:58, those 5 minutes give me the ability to go on all four of my sites. If I don't get that all the time, it is what it is. But I can react quicker. I can think of, I guess, a game script where this guy is going to be successful or not. And you go from there. But I really do think if I get it later is more beneficial for the late swapper. Like, for example, yesterday, we got the Kobe White thing a little bit earlier than I'd been hoping. Right. A lot of people projected with Caruso and Levine gone with health and safety, Caruso out with a concussion. Everyone thought Dosunmu and Kobe White would start. I was like, let's just wait on this news. It came out way too early. I was like, damn it. I would have liked Kobe White either way. So his ownership did fall to a point where like I still liked him a lot. And just like understanding who Kobe White is and what the usage might look like and running the second unit at times. But little things like that over a long period of time has paid off for me. Now, going back to your original thing, I really don't think, I think NBA DFS is almost solved pretty much if there is no late swap. I don't think there's much difference. I do think if it's a no late swap, there is a good chance we would be seeing duplicates, like ties up top to win more nights than not. I don't know about more nights than not, but we'll be seeing like first and second in large slates, like
just because the projections are so good, or why do you think that is?
Yeah, projections are really good across the board nowadays, and like they're pretty good. And I mean, they have improved drastically, and now I would love to see how that would happen if there was an opportunity. If there's no NBA late swap, how I would do. I just don't know. Do I want to find out? Yes, no, maybe so. Things have gone really well.
As long as it doesn't actually affect your bankroll, you want to find out.
Yeah, so it will. I don't think they'll. From a player perspective, it's pretty awful if your player is out and you can't swap him out.
Yeah, which it was on FanDuel for a while. So I don't know if you were playing FanDuel those days, but there were years where there was no late swap, and there was late swap on DraftKings, not on FanDuel, and I actually loved it at the time because I'd play 50% of a player that was questionable. Like everybody else can be scared of this guy, and I'm going to play him anyway and just hope for the best.
So in 2018, 2019, FanDuel would drop your lowest score.
Yep,
that resulted in a huge stars and scrubs lineup because people would just play a $3,500 player who doesn't even touch the court, and they'll be like, okay, we'll take the 0, but we'll just maximize salary everywhere else. And that really helped if you had a solid optimizer. Unfortunately, I did not have the bankroll to MME then. I just didn't. I just didn't have the bankroll at that juncture. It took me a long time to get a sustainable bankroll, but damn, I would do well in this if I had the opportunity to. So yeah, it is what it is.
So I want to just get back to this, just because you said, so you're with late swap, you're willing to play some players that other people aren't going to be willing to play after late swap. I assume that you get there by giving them a boost to their projection, or how are you getting to players that nobody else is getting to within Fantasy Retro? Is that because you are projecting them yourself within Fantasy Retro, altering the projection yourself?
Yeah, sometimes I'll do that if I'm in a rush, or I'll just like lock that player in and just be like, okay, I want the lineups with him in there just to get exposure to him. And he might not project well, but in a way I draw a game scenario for him, I can see him being successful, and I'm willing to take that chance. It's all about taking chances for me, and I'm completely fine with that. I will take some drastic chances on some unknown players more times, not more times than not, but nights that I've done successful. It's like my first massive, I guess my first 6-figure NBA win was playing Jordan Poole at 3K at 0.5% owned. Wow. So I like, it was the NBA trade deadline. I knew the type of player he was. This Golden State was shorthanded. No projection system, really liked him. At the time, some people thought he was like one of the 10 worst players in the league. I was like, I'll still play him. And I think I had 50% of him win the field at 0.5%. So
wow,
I will do things like that. And I think the more recent one this year might have been Trey Murphy III. I will do things like that. Probably a little bit more often. Look, this will probably not work out more time. It will not work out more times than not. But when it does, I think I am sweeping like contests. And that has happened multiple times.
Yeah, and that's got to be a fun feeling. I don't think I've ever swept a contest. I usually spread stuff out so much that I'm not going to be first, second, third ever in a contest. But I imagine that's a pretty good feeling to just crush everybody's hopes and dreams.
I have never done first, second, third on like the main NBA DraftKings thing. It would be nice
just summer league.
But you really don't want to play like that. You want to diversify your portfolio. Yeah. That is very unique circumstances for me.
Have you ever done 1 through 150 in summer league, NBA?
No, I've done 2 through 151.
Oh, that's rough.
Yeah,
I think good for that one guy. All right, I think one player.
2 through 151. I'll take it though. I mean, 2 through 151 is pretty awesome. Have I done 1 through 150 in a contest before? Maybe in a showdown or a single game. Maybe I'd have to look back at it. But now it's also being duped with other people.
All right. Well, that actually brings me to the next thing that I want to talk to you, get your opinion on this. So I see that you've had a lot of success in NBA Showdown, which is a format that for me, I've never really been able to get into because I have concerns that there's not enough edge there because NBA is so projections based. Like on main slates, typically if you're leaving $1,000 on the salary on the table, that's too much. So like for NBA, for like NFL Showdown, I like to leave salary on the table is one way that I like to get different with NFL Showdown. So for NBA Showdown, I'm like, man, it's hard to get different because projections are so good. It's so projectable. But then if you play like any of the good projected lineups, you're going to be duped a million times. So I've been hesitant to get involved with NBA Showdown because I'm worried that there's not enough edge with the rake involved and everything. Have you found that it is somewhere that there is edge? Do you believe that there is currently edge with NBA Showdown?
Tough question. Depending on the slate, depending on the day, where I know where I guess projection models or ownership models are a little off, I'll have a good day. Otherwise, it's pretty solid. I do think a lot of lineups being thrown out there are pretty darn rock solid. When NBA Showdown first or an NBA single game released, that is the next level of my confidence I received. Like that's like the next level. I was like, wow, I'm getting first on DraftKings often. Even though if it was duped, it was just amazing to see my name next to first place because the feeling first place is awesome in any type of contest. I mean, you make lineups to come in first, and you should always try to make lineups to come in first. So I was like, that was a great feeling. That's the first time I really felt confident on DraftKings and FanDuel because it was happening at a higher clip. And obviously, smaller player pool, a lot easier to come first, a lot less potential game slate outcomes, obviously, with a 1 game sample. But I do think more times than not, it is there are lineups out there that are really good. And you could even make the case that it is solved. And now, if there is news breaking I think there was an instance this year that Dwight Howard was ruled a starter at about 3 minutes left to go, 3 minutes left to start. And they're like little things like that. Okay, yeah, I'm going to have a good day just because people are going to mess this up, and little things like that. So that's not really late swap. It's just reacting to news quicker than everyone else, and no one will have the ability to late swap.
Right.
But I do think it's pretty solved. It's tough not to chase. I've had some solo wins on NBA Showdown, but those are very if I get 3 NBA Showdown solo wins, like not duping with anyone else, that's a great, I think, season. I mean, last couple of years I've had 2. So. Yeah, so great, like showdown season. So sometimes it works out, and that's another thing. That's another situation where I'm willing to play players that no one else is willing to play. In a situation
for sure.
like that. And the reward is much higher, but the risk is still pretty great.
Yeah. That's what I try to do when I do play Showdown. I just go over the field on all the guys that nobody wants to play and just kind of hope for some bad foul luck. I was about to say injury luck. That's not what I meant. So I want players to foul out so that, backups can get in the game. And that's kind of what I feel like I'm banking on with NBA Showdown. But I haven't had a ton of success with NBA Showdown. So I'm glad to hear that you sort of agree, but that, that makes sense to me, that there would be edge in certain situations where maybe the field is getting a lot of stuff wrong and you can find edge. And obviously with late breaking news, for sure you can find edge. I also noticed that looking through your top results, you've had days where you win Showdown and you're duping yourself like 10 to 20 times. Is that something that you do on purpose just because you have confidence in your projections and, it's not worth it because it's going to be duped so many times to just win with one? So you're like, I'll put this lineup in 20 times and take a bigger proportion of the first place prize pool. Is that intentional?
Yeah, that's completely intentional. And I did that on purpose just because I don't think I can make better than 15 lineups. I can't make 11 good lineups where the rest of the field is under I'm only making 10 really good lineups because I think the field has it right. Okay. Where I still can get different in these 10 lineups where I'm going to do really well. And it has happened multiple times that those 10 lineups have come first because it's just so many small outcomes. So, if I'm only making 10 lineups, so it's 15 lineups will come first, or if I'm making 10 lineups will come first. Just be 150 divided by 10 or 150 divided by 15. Yeah, I'll do that. I'll even maybe sometimes do 75 and 2, 50 and 3. Really depends on the slate. But now with I've been experimenting more, just like obviously I've done majority of the times is just 150 lineups. And I've noticed where I think I was like, man, maybe I should try this out. So it's just like, I'm always trying different things out to see how they go. It's all a small sample size. We'll never know if that was right, but first place is first place. You can't never take that away. Yeah,
and first place times 15 is more fun than first place times 1 in those contests where I was duping a lot. So yeah, it's an interesting. I've never tried that strategy of just making fewer lineups and duping myself and hoping that I can get a bigger proportion of the prize pool. But maybe that's what you need to do in sports like NBA with Showdown, where there's only so many good lineups that you can make. That makes some sense to me.
I don't necessarily recommend it because it's very, very unique circumstances, and that's like maybe it's worked out 3 times out of, I don't know, the 1,000 Showdown slates I've played. So it's not something that it's recommended. If you want to come first, try to build a unique lineup where the game script works out for you, and it could definitely pan out. But more times than not, someone else is probably going to have that thing, especially in NBA.
Okay. All right. So last week my guest, on High Stakes was Gene B. Kim, and we talked about how you had gone into his class at Stanford and given a lecture at his class, probability in gambling, and you were the guest lecturer and you were there for a full hour, I believe, of lecture. How did that go for you? Did you enjoy doing a lecture in front of that Stanford class?
Yeah, I actually loved it. It was a great, I think once in a lifetime opportunity that I was like, yeah, I'll definitely do this. I believe it went the full 2 hours. I think I just ran with it, and it was a ton of fun. And just If you ever want to see screenshots from me, you got to apply to Stanford, take that class. So
I was going to say, I noticed that you shared some screenshots for the class. So what is it? Why are you withholding from the rest of your fans on Twitter? You're never sharing your screenshots on Twitter. I see you win $100,000 and there's no mention of it anywhere. What's the deal with that? Why are you so opposed to putting out your screenshots?
So I have obviously friends I have friends who follow me as well. And I just like want my friends just to know me as me. I don't want my friends to know me as he just won 100 grand yesterday type of situation. I just want my friends to value me as a person who I am and gain their respect. Because I have a ton of friends who follow me as well. And if they happen to find out, I'll have the conversation with them. But I don't need to publicize that. If a lot of times, if someone else is sharing your success, that's as successful as it can get. And the reason why I was like, yeah, I'll just share these just to show. That was a reward. I also showed like the ups and downs of everything over the past, I guess, closing out on 7 years of playing DFS, of how things started and when things took off, when things didn't go as well. So kind of showed them the whole storyline of my whole journey of playing DFS. So yeah, and I just gonna run with the bit where I'm only gonna share screenshots at Stanford.
All right, that's fair. Fair enough. You need to get into Stanford. You need to take this course, and then you'll get to see RynPak screenshots. All right, just had to check in on that status, the Stanford class, because I thought that was kind of an interesting thing that you did. It's pretty cool that you were able to go in and talk to some young bright minds and teach them DFS a little bit. Are you worried that they're going to learn too much and get too good and beat us at DFS?
I mean, that's anything in life, right? The next generation is always going to be sharper. It's going to be smarter. They're going to be well adapted, be more successful than us. And I think that's completely fine. That's why another reason why I love teaching kids. I was tutoring kids, high school ACT, high school math, and I'm completely fine giving back knowledge from what I learned. And if they can make it better, that's awesome. I think you want the next generation to be better than yours. So it's just part of life. Right? I think
that's great.
You want to be able to accept that, and you don't want to hold any egos. And if a kid comes out of there, great success. And if he wants to give me credit, that's awesome. I'll take that to heart. So if I made that type of impact on someone, that'd be great.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective. And obviously I'm the same way. That's the reason I do content. I do a free show with Jordan Cooper, just for the fun of it, because I enjoy talking about this stuff and I enjoy teaching people and hope they can learn something from my process. So I can definitely appreciate your perspective there. And on that note, we've got several listener questions that I wanted to get to. I'll start with one from Buford DFS on Twitter. Asked, when do you know if you should do single entry only or be an MME player? I've had success at single entry, tried to do MME, and it's not panning out as well as I thought. Looking at results can be indicative, but also with the variability of DFS, are there ways to check your MME process? So when do you think if you should just stick to single entry and not try MME? And are there things that you check to kind of figure out whether MME is working out for you?
Well, there are great tools to backtest. I believe Lineup Rewind on Fantasy Cruncher is one way to backtest. But I never jumped from 1 to 150. I went from 1 to 11. I went 1 to 20, 11 to 20. I really grit and grinded my way through. So single entry is fine. You stick to your single entry, but you have to keep in mind on what your goals are. And the goals are pretty easy for one to say, I just want to make as much money as possible. Well, that's awesome. Now, how do you simplify that? Well, if you're building one lineup, that's great. And see how you're doing. You're doing well. And I suggest moving up to the 3 entry max and try to build different lineups there and see how you're doing. Once you find success there, you go up to, I believe there's 5 entry max. Sometimes there's 11 entry max. But now I wouldn't do any of this if you're a novice player, I would always try to play the beginner contest in any site, anything given. I think Yahoo's no veteran contest is great to play if you're a beginning player. DraftKings has beginner contests. Take advantage of those, because the best way to be profitable quickly and over a more consistent period of time is playing softer opponents. And that's where you should be focusing majority of your bankroll, if not all your bankroll there. And that's something that it took me a year and a half. I was chasing the big one when I was in school. And then I scrolled back. I was like, let me try to beat these guys who are in similar skill level as me. Using our data and information is going to put your leg up on the field as is. And then be willing to adapt your process over time. Like my process this year, or even let alone in the month of March, was not the same in February. It's always is evolved over time based on how the sport's changing or how data is changing and what's available to you. So take baby steps up. Don't jump too far in, because like you said, results can be indicative, and take a step back, learn from what you're doing, and try to apply that on the next step up as you go up in higher stakes.
Let me take a moment away from this conversation with RynPak to remind you to give us a like and subscribe so you can keep up with all of our shows, DFS offers, giveaways, and much more. Once you subscribe, hit that notification button to get alerts when our shows go live. Be sure to also check out our monthly podcast giveaway. Just subscribe to our podcast channel and leave a 5-star review with your Awesemo username or Twitter handle to be entered to win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. So I want to touch on one thing that you said. So you said that you would move on from like single entry to like a 3 max to a 5 max, whatever, move up in stakes that way. And you mentioned early on in the show that that was one way that you found improvement. When you got better as a player, it was more about like contest selection and bankroll management, which are things that I don't think are really my strengths, if I'm being honest. And people have asked me like, do you think it's okay to play 5 lineups in a contest that is a 150 max? And my answer is, that's how I started. Like I never really got into single entry or 3 max or 20 max, even when I was only playing 3 entries, 5 entries, 10 entries. I was the same way as you. I built up started with like a couple lineups, and then eventually I'm building 5 and then 10 and then 20. But for me, it was always in the biggest field contests. And it's not something that I never even really thought about, like, am I putting myself at a disadvantage by playing 20 entries in a contest where other people can play? I mean, back when I started, probably people were playing 500, but now people could play 150. So do you think that that is a big disadvantage to be only playing 5 entries in a contest where other people are MMEing, or is that something that you would avoid? Would you say that, I mean, obviously if you can do the beginner contests, that's an edge just because beginners are not as good, but maybe once you're past that step, would you still avoid, if you only have the bankroll for 5 entries, would you avoid playing the MMEs and just stick to like a 5 max?
It's going to come down to your risk tolerance, right? So when I first started it, my bankroll didn't allow me to have a greater risk tolerance like that. I was very content making $25, $30 a week extra. Now, let's say a lot of our audience might have a 9 to 5 where they're okay losing $100 a week or $100 a day, or maybe $50 a day, where you're okay firing off 2 or 3 lineups in that big 150 max. And if you were to play that throughout a season, maybe you have a day you come into the top 10 just based on that. It's really hard, but whatever DFS bankroll you have, you should be willing to lose all of it. Otherwise, just don't have that big of a bankroll, right? So that's why I scaled down. And it just honestly, it's what your risk tolerance / goals are. Okay. Now, if you want to do this like on a quote unquote profession, as ridiculous as it sounds, you want that upside, but I would start small and then scale up. Now, if you're doing this leisurely, and I just want to make money when things go right, then I would go with the 5 lineups in the max field and try to win big, like your lottery style ticket. So you gotta know your risk tolerance, your goals, and have some perspective. It's DFS. You're gonna lose more often than you win, but when you win, you want to make sure you win big.
Yep. All right. I think that's good advice. I like that advice. And also, one of the things that I look at, I use Roto Tracker to look at like how I do in different contests. So that's kind of how I figured out this past year that I'm like, holy shit, I'm doing really well in contests where it's $20 buy-in or less, and horribly when it's more than that. So I've kind of limited. I still play some higher entry stuff because I can't help myself, but I've really limited the amount that I played after looking at Roto Tracker and figuring out maybe my edge isn't as good there. Maybe it's a smaller sample size too, but so far I haven't had the success. So I'm sticking to the larger field stuff. Is that something that you look at to figure out like, oh, I'm good at single entry contests versus large field, and to figure out what kind of edge you have, or you think that it's not something that you put a lot of
I don't really try to focus too much on it. A lot of times it's going to come down to like, is Russell Westbrook going to get that triple double bonus? And it's just going to be like the difference between first and second. So I don't really focus too much on it. The goal is always trying to make lineups to come in first place and have as many potential lineups to come in first place. And that's all I try to focus on. So past results are great to just look back and take a look at just to see, especially for me in NBA, I'm content just the way I approach it. Other sports, maybe I'll be like, all right, it's time to stop playing some NFL tiers contest where I'm just like, yeah, this lineups are good and just losing to rake, and I'll just stop playing. But I'll look at it here and there, but it's not something that I think it can help you with your contest selection. It's a great tool to just monitor how you're doing, keeping yourself in perspective with heaters and downswings, but nothing think necessarily it's a process of where I'm looking at it. Okay, it went well today, because it could be a difference of 1 or 2 bad weeks or 1 or 2 good weeks where the numbers can change.
Yep, that's very
At
true.
least for me. Now
Yep.
it depends on everyone else's different playing style.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I find it can be useful to look at like your 1% buckets to see what proportion of your lineups you're getting in the top 1%, just to give you an idea of, has something changed? Am I like, have I lost my edge? Am I putting just 1% in the top 1%, or am I still getting a good number in there on a downswing? It can be reassuring to kind of look at that kind of stuff sometimes. And also,
I don't look at the top 1%. I look at the top 0.1%. I do think
I look at that too.
I think that is very important in terms of large field tournaments.
Yep.
There's a big difference. There's a big difference between that, I think.
Yep.
So like if you're building smaller field, 1%, like if you're 100 man field, 1% is fine. Obviously, that's going to get you, if you have more lineups in the 1%. Now, if you're building like 30,000, 60,000 field, that 0.1% bucket is as important as it gets. Like, are you getting there a lot? And hopefully you are, just because that'll give you the chances to win over a long period of time and win big more often than not. Now, obviously, variance can kick in and you'll have a bad day. Things like that can happen where you're not coming first, maybe you're coming fifth, where like a rebound here or there is difference between, or like a touchdown here and there is a difference between a milli and a not. And I've been there. It sucks, and it is what it is.
Yeah, that makes sense. I agree. The 0.1% is probably the best indicator. I look at both of them just because the 0.1%, you're dealing with smaller numbers, so gives you a larger number to look at the 1% buckets. But yeah, I think that's a good point, that is the best thing to look at probably. So we kind of touched on this already with Bufort's question, but Carlos Gomez asked a more general question. What advice would you give to those who would like to play DFS seriously but do not know where to start? So where would you recommend that a new DFS player starts?
I would say not to play DFS. And the reason why I say that, if you're in a legalized sports betting state, I would take advantage of all the deposit offers. And if your bankroll allows you to deposit $1,000, I would do it. Maximize these deposit bonus offers across the board, because obviously the difference between sports betting and DFS is peer-to-peer. Sports betting is you versus the house. And one thing, just like on an aerial view perspective, well, maybe I'll answer this when we talk about the future, but looking at the sports betting perspective, your outcomes are binary, right? It's like yes or no. And there's a lot of inefficient lines among player props. Sometimes, like if you get like the right side of the spread, just take advantage of those. Get a bankroll there, because you can build one much quicker and much more efficiently, and potentially much not greater. You'll not get a greater ROI maybe playing sports betting, depending on like what types of bets you're doing, but get a bankroll there, building up those DFS sports betting offers. Then I would go to like these like those player prop sites, like Underdog has player prop contest, PrizePicks have player prop contest, SuperDraft has player prop contest. I'd go there, get maxed out there, and then come to DFS. That's what I would do if I was a novice player now. And the reason why I do that, because it's not peer-to-peer, it's to the house. And I know those lines can be efficient, but there are enough bad lines out there where you could make yourself profitable more consistently over time than I think it is with DFS, because DFS, the people are just rolling out such great lineups across all the sports nowadays. And that's how I'd approach it. And then come to DFS. I think by then you have a sustainable bankroll where you can still do the other stuff, but you're adding DFS as another portion of your portfolio.
Okay. So I am going to actually rearrange our interview just a little bit, because we haven't touched on your big win yet, and your favorite win in DFS. So I'm going to save that for the end of the interview. Now, I thought we were going to touch on that earlier, and we'd end with your future, but I want to jump right into your thoughts on the future of DFS, because you just kind of alluded to how good DFS has gotten and how good lineups have been. So I want to hear your opinion on that. Do you have concerns about DFS not being a viable income source long term? Do you think that this is something that is going to run its course in the near future? Do you have concerns there?
Has it passed my mind that could I do this and not have to worry about going on LinkedIn and applying for other jobs? Yeah, a little bit has. I'm just riding the wave. It's been really good. DFS, I personally think, has plateaued. I think we have seen what it is. For example, DraftKings last year had the Milli Maker series. They were minting 100 Milli Makers. I'm not sure if they're doing it this year. And like little things like that, I've noticed where things are just a little more plateau. I think another thing, I was potentially hoping as sports betting got legalized that sports bettors would try out DFS, and I don't think that's happening as much. And it makes sense. Like your casual couch sports bettor, they get a yes or no spread. That's more easy for them than to fill out this complicated math puzzle of 8 different players, right? Like that's just like why? That's just too much. You're just exerting too much brain power to figure something out like that. Now, I'm sure there have been some sports bettors who have already been very good fantasy players in a short period of time. I'm sure that's happened. We just don't know who they are. I'm sure they're already there. But I do think that conversion hasn't been there as much. So I do think sports DFS has plateaued. I think this is what will the ecosystem be for at least maybe the next couple of years. Maybe we've already seen states swap their DFS eligibility for sports betting. I believe Oregon did that. Yeah. And it wouldn't shock me if more states do that. We saw Canada do that in Ontario. So yes, am I a little bit concerned? Yeah, I've also been sports betting, trying to figure that out, learn that just to give myself an advantage and another way to diversify my portfolio in another aspect, which has gone well. But I know that's not forever because as books will limit you. Books have limited me. It is what it is. So, yeah, whatever it is, if you were to tell me DFS were to end tomorrow, yes. Will I be sad? Yes, I'll be very sad. But be more than enough. DFS changed my life, and I'm very, very happy with my results and where I stand now.
Yeah, and you say that it's plateaued, which if it has plateaued and it stays on this plateau for good, I think that we're fine. Because I mean, last year
I don't know if it's for good.
Okay. Yeah. So it's plateaued for now, and we can hope that it lasts at this plateau for as long as it does. But you obviously have concerns. I mean, you've mentioned that you have concerns about people getting good enough to where they're simulating contests after they've started and simulating the way that they're going to go after they know, the ownership of the early locks and stuff like that. So for sure, you do have concerns that that's going to happen where.
Another key point is this is peer-to-peer, but it's also peer-to-peer and rake, right?
Yeah.
There's a huge component in these large field tournaments where rake is, 17, 18%, keeps going up. Now, if they were to reduce rake, maybe it's more foreseeable future. I hope they do. Obviously, as a player, I'm sure you do as well. The amount of money we've lost to rake is a significant amount over a long period of time. So that's really important to keep that hindsight. So I'm willing to adapt to other things. So we'll see how it goes. I'm just riding the wave. It's been a ton of fun. But if you were to ask me, am I a lot closer to the end than the beginning? And I think yes. I think I'm a lot closer to the end than the beginning.
Okay. Sad. Okay. Well, you are, as I've said, the youngest guest that I've had on this show so far. I think you've got plenty of time for another career if you want to take on another career. You've been doing content. You've been a guest lecturer at Stanford. So you've got plenty of experience in front of groups of people. Is that something that you could see yourself doing? Do you see yourself becoming a content creator or getting into teaching somehow long term, or do you have some other any other kind of plan for if DFS does fall by the wayside?
Yeah, I like to live on a day-to-day basis, and it's something that long-term plans, we'll see. I'm very intrigued by the concept of venture capital and whatnot. So I have dabbled myself in certain things like that. That's why I just want to learn a little bit more what else is happening in that world. Obviously, a potential looming recession might be in the works. So I don't know how that's going to affect DFS prices. I have no idea. So there's going to be less leisure income being spent among people. I don't know how much that's going to affect. So I probably this summer is probably where I need to think of what life might look like without DFS. What should I keep a backup where DFS has gone great. Don't get me wrong. I look at these starting salary jobs and I'd be like, damn, I would rather have James Harden give me the triple double bonus to win me that than listen to someone from a 9 to 5. But I just got to keep things in perspective where I know DFS isn't forever. It's not a sustainable social life for me. I'd like to be able to enjoy, go out, have fun with my friends. And it's not, you do sacrifice a lot playing DFS. And I've sacrificed a lot. Luckily, a lot of my success happened during COVID where I didn't sacrifice too much. But nowadays, there are weekends where like my buddy had a bachelor party. I was like, I can't play DFS that much this week. I got to take a step back and enjoy this. And little things like that. I got to keep myself in perspective. And because if you don't, I do think you will get a mental dark cloud where it's just like not worth it. I mean, there are so many other things to do in life. And I know it's not forever. It's the perspective I'm going on. But in terms of future, I'd like to be involved in VC, but that can change. Maybe you see me more active in the back end of Awesemo. That's potentially in the works. But I got to sit down, hone in on what I really want. And it's a question I really don't know yet, but it has to evolve over time.
That's fair. I'm a lot older than you are. I'm more than 10 years older than you are, and I still don't really know what my backup plan is if DFS doesn't last for forever. So I think it's fair to take it day by day when things are still going well. All right, I'd like to ask you a few listener questions. Richie G, who you and I both spent a lot of time with in Arizona, good guy, asked a question: do you find any pride or joy in seeing new DFS players have high success or high ROIs that you personally have given great advice to, or is it more of a shit, I should have kept it to myself thing?
No, I have a ton of joy seeing people who I've talked to personally, Richie being one of them. We chat a lot, having success. I mean, I consider like your training wheels. You're like working with someone, training them, and then they take off and they do their thing. It's great to see that success. More importantly, I love seeing when a buddy of mine does well. Like Jake Anderson, when he wins well, I love seeing like a buddy of mine do well, because Jake and I, we've been buddies through like Slacks and Discords for many years, and you just see him do success, and that's really awesome to see. Slack members who you've worked with hands-on, and that goes to the facts. Like I was like, yeah, DFS coaching has a negative connotation, but it's like it's kind of intriguing in the one hand, and but it's the thing. It's like it's variance. It's going to come down to that one lucky day, 2 lucky days. So no, I'm all about people are going to. I think over time, people are just going to figure it out. And we were already seeing the nature of that. And if you help someone out and they appreciate you, and A, maybe you get a friendship, and B, or they just happy and you just get good karma, hopefully down the line.
All right. I like that. All right, moving on. We got a question from Jordan. This is not a Jordan that, it's not Jordan Klein. And I don't know what he's referencing here, so I'll hope that you do. He asked me to ask you if JT was short.
So I'm a Michigan fan. Obviously, I went there for undergrad and grad school. He's talking about JT Barrett.
Okay.
There was a controversial call, and yes, JT Barrett was short.
Okay.
So it cost Michigan to go to the college football playoff that year. So sore subject, but yeah, JT was short for the record.
I'm glad to know that you knew what he was talking about. I was like, should I even ask this if I have no idea what the context is? It's kind of risky to ask a question not knowing the context, but
it's funny. You asked me about like my sports fandom. The only fandom I really have right now is just like Michigan sports doing well. And if the other sports, like I just let it go, like let go of biases, emotional attachment, just because of DFS. It's probably the main reason why I let go of them. Is like, I don't care for my personal sports team that much anymore. I'd rather come first in the contest than if my sports team wins.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, you and I talked about this when I was in Arizona. You made fun of me a little bit because I told you that my brother teaches at University of Michigan, and I could not tell you what it was. And speaking of having jobs that you can't explain to other people, I've talked about it with him several times, and I'm like, yeah, it's above my head. It's sciencey stuff. Let's not get into it. Yeah, so there's that Michigan connection. All right, we got several questions from Tony on Twitter, and I'll just go one by one. He asked, what is your favorite thing to do to unwind?
Favorite thing to do to unwind? Like just like in life?
Yeah,
sit back and relax. I'm an only child, so I really value like social hangouts with my friends. Enjoy a big rooftop bar person. I love going to rooftops. That's my vibe. I love doing high intensive interval training. Before COVID, I was like 4 to 5 times a day, but after COVID, my whole like physical exercise routine has been up and down. We've now, I believe, gone from a pandemic to an endemic. So that's the next thing. My focus is getting back into a physical shape again. So that's kind of how I unwind. That's my thing. I really enjoy meeting new people, going back, like connecting. I love meeting other DFS players to see what they're doing outside of DFS. I'm always very curious on seeing how that ends up going.
All right, so that's let's jump in there, and I'll get back to Tony's questions. But you've had some success at live finals. You've had kind of a lot of success at live finals. You've been and you made it to several, and then you and I got to spend a lot of time together in Arizona. You actually went in Alex's stead. Alex couldn't make it, so he sent you. And I was disappointed that Alex couldn't make it, and then I was also had a really fun time with you. So that was I enjoyed talking DFS with you and other DFS players. Is that something that you seek out? Like, is that part of the reason that you seek out live final events? I mean, obviously it's the huge prize pools at live finals, but is it also that it's just you like the experience?
Yeah. So ironically enough, 2017, I guess I had my first live final experience when I crashed it. I was 22 at a time, but I was like, oh, open bar. So maybe I had one too many cocktails at the open bar. But not only I think that live final was key because I met Alex and Tom that live final. Then couple of years later, I got absolutely destroyed at an open bar, and then I had to tone things down. I was like, it was my final weekend in Chicago, and I was just like having my own farewell tour with everybody there. So it's a live final for me. I've had more fun when I've attended as a guest or no lineup on the line. It's just like you don't have to worry about anything. You just enjoy meeting people. Usually the open bar, the food is more times than not pretty good, and more than not, just meeting like-minded people having similar interests is second to none at these events. I didn't really try aggressively trying for live finals. I tried one in 2019 for the 2020 NBA championship. I got there on a single bullet. I only spent $20 to get in. COVID canceled it. I was devastated when I found out the NBA season was canceled on March 11th, 2020, because the NBA live final was on March 14th of 2020. And I was like devastated. I was like, I was going to win with this. And they like cashed out a ticket. I was really upset. It was out in LA. And then I didn't really try for a live finals till the following year, where I was like, I built up like a bankroll where I was like, okay, I'm going to be willing to spend this much on live finals because I know how much they cost. I did really well. Every live final I attended, I came in the top 7 in all of them but one. And the one I didn't was when Lamar Jackson sprained his ankle in the live final. So I've done really well when I've gotten there. So where it's made up for whatever price. But for me, it's the people who I've met, I've really enjoyed. I've really been able to meet awesome people who have been much more successful than I have, people who count money in commas. So it's definitely a ton of fun meeting like-minded people.
Yeah.
Success is great, but I really enjoy understanding more importantly what they are doing outside of DFS because it takes up a lot of time, but they also have other jobs, sometimes other goals that they have, other things that they're invested in. I'm really curious on what these people are doing because you can connect to them differently. And DFS players perceive life a lot different than the average human. So our conversations are much more fluid and we can go back and forth with each other.
So you are typically talking, I mean, you like talking about things outside of DFS, but you are typically talking with the DFS players. So that's a difference between you and that Stunna who I had on a couple weeks ago. He was saying that he likes to go to the live finals and talk with the guests more so. He's like, he enjoys talking to the guests of the DFS pros. It sounds like you enjoy talking more so with the DFS. I mean, you can obviously enjoy talking with both, but you find enjoyment actually talking.
I'm just more of a social person. That's why COVID for me was like, dang, I miss meeting people. And the live finals, I think going back to them, were a ton of fun just to meet people and just talking about different things. Sometimes, I mean, obviously there's a DFS core subject but when you talk about other things,
right.
Hearing their insight is really helpful. I mean, at the end of the day, you really are not going to know the person's process. It's just like they have their own unique process that's made them successful. And if you try to mimic it, you probably won't be as successful as them just because they have different things that they do. So I don't really try to delve into people's processes that much. Maybe we'll talk about things a little bit here and there, but outside of that, it's just the conversation of meeting like-minded people.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, you and I spent a lot of time together along with my wife, your friend V, and we didn't really talk DFS all that much. I think we touched on it here and there, but it was definitely not a huge part of our conversation. And, we were hanging out with Richie G and hanging out with Eric Hoffman, DFS Hofbräu King, kind of forming our own little clique some of those nights. That was a really good time. Just being able
funny
to
you bring up V. He's seen like the come up of my DFS journey from like living in that living room in that apartment with him, seeing like the success. And I felt like I was like, I wanted to bring him out to one of these events, and he had a great time. He loved golfing at TPCs. So that was, he was a big golfer. So it's fun to like take your friends out to these, and like, not all my friends understand what's happening, but the ones that my inner circle, I just want to be like, it's just like come out for a week and it'll be a good time. So I've been fortunate to take out some of my good buddies who've seen the come up, and I appreciate a lot. So these events are a ton of fun. They put on a great event at that tournament. So I was really happy Alex won a Million Maker to send me out there. So
how would you say the Tournament of Champions experience compared to other live finals, like, basketball finals or other finals that you've been to? Is it a very different experience?
Different experience because of the crowd, but the experience of the excursions were second to none. They were by far the best all put together event in terms of excursions experience. Everything was awesome planning. So that was by far, you probably went to the best one that I've been to. I'm sure there've been some great ones in years past. It was different because of the crowd there.
Yeah.
There's not your typical crowd of like
Yeah.
on the other live finals. You're like seeing the same live final people over and over again. You see your Hosta Boss, you see your BK Kreider, and you see Chipotle Addict, Papa Gates, Giant Squid, all those household names. Squirrel Patrol, those guys are always there. Austin was there. This one was different. These are guys who won the Millie Maker, and like sometimes they are not household names, and there were some,
Yeah.
but not all of them were like the household names you see at other events.
Yeah, it's kind of what I imagine. I mean, it was even more so the year before. So that's the only live final that I've ever been to is, of course, the Tournament of Champions, which is kind of funny. Yeah, right. But it's the only one I've ever been to. I've tried for some of the other ones, but it's especially the first year, it was a few pros, but mostly just like people who won the Millie Maker, and they're just doing a single entry or a few entries here and there. They're not really the most serious DFS players. It was actually it was more this year. There were more serious DFS players, I thought. And then of course I was hanging out with you. You're obviously a serious DFS player, so I thought it was a higher proportion of very serious DFS players this year. But yeah, relative to like I see the list of names in like the NBA live final, and it's like 80% people that I recognize. Like I know who these guys are. So it seems like that's more of a, you get like all of the great DFS minds together in one place kind of a thing at the other live final event. So I can see how that would be fun if you enjoy, meeting those kinds of people.
Yeah. And like I've fortunately met them multiple times, great conversations. And that's just how live finals are, and people tend to have fun. It's a great, I guess, networking event in a way, just you're meeting the face behind the username that either is beating you or you're beating them like over and over again. It's just how it goes. So
yep.
Live finals are a ton of fun to meet people who have similar interests as you.
Yeah, for sure. And especially you. I mean, that's how you met Alex, and so it kind of ended up leading to kind of a part of your career at least, and getting you more invested in DFS. All right. So we kind of got off track there answering these listener questions. Getting back to Tony's questions, he was kind of curious about downswings and like your mindset during downswings and what kinds of things you do to kind of assess a downswing, whether it is something that you have concerns about it being ongoing versus like, okay, I recognize that downswings happen. Obviously they happen for everybody. And he also wanted to know what's the lowest you felt on a downswing mentally?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So this kind of goes back to like when I was moving up in stakes on DraftKings and FanDuel. On FanDuel, you can play up till the $3 contest until you have, I believe, $70,000 in profit. And once you pass that, you are not allowed to play anything the $2 or the $1 or anything less than that. So I kept playing those until I passed that. And I kept on DraftKings, once you pass the $1 million entry total fee with entries paid, you can no longer play anything with, I believe, with I forget, it's like a certain prize pool amount, like a dollar amount. Like I can't play anything $3 and below on DK unless the prize pool is greater. So, but until that point, I never had back-to-back losing months until I passed it. So this is like something that I was just shows how much like if you were to scale your process properly, I never had back-to-back losing months. The first time I had back-to-back losing months was, I want to say, I think last April, and I think it was during the Russell Westbrook explosion. I just had back-to-back losing months where I just was like, Russell Westbrook was exploding and I was consistently under the field to him. Bad process. Looking back at it, I was just trying to get too cute with ownership at times. So, and then that was last year. And then I recovered from that really quick with a great like opening weekend in NFL. But from week 2 or week 3 to all the way, I think King of the Beach, I just went on this epic downswing that I had never faced before. There was no other sport besides NFL. I was getting smacked across the head with Showdown, smacked across the head with any sort of contest. I was just getting destroyed in this massive downswing, where to the point where leading up to the NBA season, I think I took 20 days off. I think I like sporadically, like by 20 days off, I was just playing like 2 or 3 lineups, or I was just only playing on one site where I just needed to reset. I had some plan. I went to California to reset. I went to Professor Kim's class. I went to Eric Lindquist's wedding, where I was like, all right, this is a good reset before I have a couple big like live finals coming up. And then I finished December pretty strong. Ironically, I came back from the Lamar Jackson sprained ankle and had a massive Monday. So thankfully that made up for the a disappointment there. And it's pretty sobering when you see your quarterback at a live final just sprained his ankle. And when you have like really good players across the board everywhere else. And it's just perspective. I knew a downswing was going to happen. And I also knew my heater that I had in the NBA 2020 bubble was never going to be repeated again. I just was living like, I don't know, a Jay-Z lifestyle where like I just was doubling my money on a weekly basis. I knew that was not going to happen again. So I had the perspective and the mindset where like things can go bad, but how do you like keep yourself level headed? And I've had ups and downs since then. And I think that's more of like it. I just went on a massive heater and like low stakes and then a heater to start off like in like when I was MMEing, but I know what things are like. And another thing that has helped offset my downswings is sports betting and player props. I've done pretty well on them. So that has helped me offset things here and there. I just keep the steady course. I feel like my process and intuition is there to keep me on the right swing of things. And yeah, downswings are part of the game. You just hope they're not too deep.
Yep, that's just sounds just right, and that's pretty nice to be able to offset it with your sports betting and stuff. So you just don't really have downswings, is what I'm hearing.
No, it's not. You do have downswings. You're gonna have losing days. There are certain things that just make it annoying when the downswings are happening. Where stat correction here or there. I've had some brutal stat corrections over the past couple of months where it's knocked me out of first, which is like that's kind of awful because first to second is a big difference.
Yeah.
First place is pretty much everything I shoot for. So. But you got to keep yourself level-headed. For every good beat, you'll have a bad beat. And I just try to ride the course and ride the wave for as long as this is around.
Yep. So you're just have an understanding that it's going to happen, and have that understanding, and you can ride it out. That's kind of what I do too.
And don't get me wrong, when I was in when I was like first playing like one lineup, it would suck to lose one lineup 5 days in a row. It just would suck. Like, granted, if I'm playing only like $2 or $3 a day, I was like, that sucked. I was like not even like making anything. This sucks because like at then you just don't have much risk tolerance. Your bank is very dry, very low, and can't play with much. But
and you're still putting in the effort. You're still putting in couple hours every day to try to make it work. So it's still frustrating when you don't win. I remember those days well of just having not that much money at stake, but it's still just it wears on you to not win over a period of time several days in a row.
And I was also the same guy in the Slack Discord asking QQ is still alive before locker. So like I know the 1v1, 2v2 questions. I've been that person asking them before. So nice. I understand when chat is asking those questions, how meaningful and how valuable those answers can be. So it's really sometimes where I just I couldn't afford a subscription when you start off really low. You got to build yourself up to something like that.
Yep, that makes sense. All right, a couple more questions from some familiar faces before we close it out with my favorite win question. First, we got a question from Eric Lindquist asking, who is your favorite co-host on the Slate Starter podcast, and why is it Duke?
Duke's been a great addition to the Slate Starter podcast. And shout out to Eric Lindquist, someone who I really had to convince to give a shot to doing this. He's someone that I met, I believe, in the FanDuel Slack Discord in like, I want to say 2016, like, we talked here and there and we became friendly over time. And he told me that he was an actor, did acting work. And then we had kept in touch and I told him, hey, I'm starting working at Awesemo. I think you can always write for us if you ever wanted to, because I knew he was a really good writer. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't get to write as much anymore, but he's by far one of the best writers out there in terms of content. And I was like, just give it a shot. If it doesn't work out, no hard feelings. You can go back to what you're doing. He gave it a shot during COVID, kind of the Slate Starter. I kind of like asked Nolan Kelly, he's like, hey, can we try this out? If it works out well, the best thing you can get out of it is another great host who can do all sports. And he's ran with it. He's put in a lot of work, and it's a ton of fun doing that show at night. And Eric's come a long way in terms of just doing everything across the board in terms of sports. Yeah,
I'm lucky enough to get to work with Eric once a week, and I was during NFL season too, so always fun to work with Eric. I don't get to do it every day like you do, and I have yet to work with Duke, unfortunately, but yeah, Eric's fun to work with too, I guess. Another familiar name, Jordan Klein asks you, who is your favorite Jewish/Filipino coworker?
It's not Jordan Klein for sure. No, definitely not.
It's got to be somebody else.
Yeah, Jordan Klein, spoiled man. He lives a great life out in California. Awesome guy, great producer. It's not Jordan Klein. I'll tell him that.
All right, fair enough. Now he knows. He shouldn't ask that question again. All right. So we've alluded to it. Your favorite win that you had a big win. Your first big win, I believe you were telling me, was a really fun one. But just maybe it's not that. Tell me to close it out about your favorite win in DFS and/or your favorite DFS win celebration.
Yeah. So let's fast forward to, I think, May 29th or May 30th, 2019. All right. I think a couple of days before that, CEO Tom Kennedy, plays by Tom JK321. He asked me, he's like, "Hey, Ryan, do you want to do a show with Eddie Fear on the NBA Live before lock?" And I was like, wow, I was like, that's a tough task. Finals, NBA Finals, Game 1. At the time, this was the biggest contest DraftKings and FanDuel had ever run for showdown and single game in their history of NBA showdown single game. And I was up until this point, I was accumulating tickets for these contests, especially on FanDuel. I accumulated 60 satellite tickets for their contests at the time. And this is 30th. And I'm in the process of obviously working with them part-time. And I was very friendly with Eddie, and Eddie was very welcoming and obviously accepting of me to do the show with him. And a lot of people who've seen Eddie over the years, people have connected with him, and he's been a solid friend of mine, great mentor, helped me get into the DFS industry space. So pretty grateful for what he did. And we did the show together. But on that same day, I also got accepted to grad school in Michigan. So I was like, oh, this is awesome. I got accepted to grad school, and then I'm going to do a show in a couple hours. And I told some of my friends that I'm doing this show who have known that I was pretty into DFS. So they're pretty thrilled to watch me. So I host a show, my first show. It's Game 1 of the finals, big contest. And I'm pretty nervous. I was drinking a ton of water on the show. I just generally drink a lot of water throughout the show. And it's, when your first show, it is very hard. Our talent make it seem so easy how the shows are, but it is a hard task to do in the beginning because you don't know how much you're like talking, where you want to talk, where you should cut people off, or when you want to say. And everyone in chat wants to hear my co-host speak at the time, and I was like definitely giving my thoughts as well. And fast forward that night, Alex and a lot of the Chicago players were meeting up at a bar at the time in Chicago on Kinsey Street. And I had just finished up the show, entered my lineups. They're all watching Game 1 together. And at this table, this is probably a pretty high roller table. You have Alex and Awesemo. You have Tom JK. You have Brick75, Sean Zahn, Papa Gates, and Evan Silva was there. And then there's me, the scrub, who's just still a young 20-year-old just coming off doing his first show. And everyone was very, very nice to me. And Brick was awesome. It's a nice show. And the night goes on. It's a great Game 1. It's the Warriors versus Raptors. And this was the weirdest sweat was I've never had a 5-figure wins up until this point. I'm like looking at my phone here and there. And the one thing about everyone at that table is no one looks at their phone, which blows my mind at this time. Like I'm always looking at my phone, refreshing results. And it just blows my mind because the amount of volume that they're playing is surreal, right? It's not real to anyone, and at the end of the third quarter, and I see my phone, I'm like, oh, I'm in first place. This is kind of wild. If I was by myself, I'd be like pacing back and forth, but I have to be at a table where first place to them is any day that ends in Y. And like, right. I just gotta control myself and compose myself. And then in showdown, it's really hard to maintain first, but that was a hold sweat. I stayed in first on FanDuel from the start of the fourth quarter all the way to the end of the fourth quarter. I didn't move past the first and second. And there you go. That was my first biggest win. And I had to hold my emotions in check because I'm with people who have done this numerous times. Like this is nothing to them. This is like, and I was like so thrilled inside of me. So I just had to act like I'd been there before, even though I had it.
Did you tell them? Did they know that you were sweating first place? Like, I mean,
I told them
looking at their phones. Okay.
After the show, and then we all got a bunch of round of tequila shots. It was a ton of fun, and in my mind, I was like, wow, that just really happened. You never get a win with the guys that you've always seen win, and my first 5-figure win. And I noticed my perspective of like, I guess life changed at the moment. Going from like a few $1,000s in your bank to $50,000 is a big difference from, let's say, going from a couple $100,000 to like $1 million. It's just a massive, like going nothing to having something to like sustain. And I just got into grad school. I was like, oh, this is going to help pay for the majority of grad school, if not all. And then in my head, I was like, I'm just going to enjoy this. It didn't really hit me till, funny enough, I believe Brick and I took Uber because he was living in like the similar area as me, chatted. And I was like, damn, he was congratulating me. It was a great, like, for me, I'll forever remember that day. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
that's like their stepping stone to success.
How much was that win? You said five figures.
I think it was 57 or 58.
Okay. Yeah, that's that'll do. So it was a split, I assume.
Yeah, split 3 ways. Yeah.
Nice.
And that would have been life changing for me. And I was like, in my head, I was like, all right, now I got the bankroll. I've always thought if I had a bankroll, I could be successful. And then I played baseball a little more successfully in that summer. Things took off in that fall, and I've never looked back since. And
yeah, the rest is history.
The rest is history. So it's a great for me, that I'll always remember that day. It's better than any other win. I've had some much more significant wins then, but that first one, well, you'll always hold pretty close to you. And a lot of those guys I consider friends, and we hang out. And Alex and Tom. If it weren't for Tom to give me the opportunity, I don't think majority of my success happens. I think I'm probably in some, like, I don't know, hospital working, or maybe in medical school. Who knows? I have no idea. So I'm pretty grateful.
No, this wasn't before. You had already started with Awesemo at this point.
Yeah, okay. But I think if I don't start working at Awesemo, I don't take DFS to be like I don't take it as serious. I think I'm more of a casual player. Maybe it happens. You never know. But pretty grateful for the opportunity that they gave, and I just it changed my life, and it's been a great story, and I ran with it. Have been able to experience and enjoy life a lot differently since then because of that. And it's great to keep coming in first. And I always tell people, if you want to win, you try to make lineups to come in first place. So
that's good advice, I think. Come in first place. Yeah. That's it seems so simple when you put it like that. I mean, that's an amazing story though. Like I didn't know what the story was going to be, your first win story, but that's about as good as it gets. Being the underdog at a table like that where everybody's just a major heavy hitter, and for you to be kind of the one guy who isn't at that point is pretty fun that you were able to pull out your first huge win.
And I think also doing my first ever show, we just made like the ice, like cherry on top, and then coming back, people like, it's really nice when YouTube chat loves you versus YouTube chat hating you. And
yep.
You know, I know what the hate feels like on the first show, and I know what the love feels like. So it was a great turnaround, and it's just like constantly people just obviously live in the moment. So looking back at it, I was like, it was really surreal. It didn't hit me till I got home and woke up the next day, and like I was like, yo, that happened, and I could really and that was like my final summer in Chicago, and the rest I've just been grinding it out. We'll see how much longer we play. It's been a great ride. So, but to say that I'd ever be in the top 10, even after that, I never thought I would. I swam around in the top 10 for a little bit, fell back, and I'm pretty content with everything, my results. And
when you say the top 10, do you mean like in the Roto Grinders overall rankings?
Yeah,
I see that you're right there.
I think the highest I got to was 7. And then I believe Whistles Go Woo became a monster and just like knocked me out. But no, I knew I was not going to be able to sustain, because like the volume I play is not high. Like I don't play the high stakes consistently enough to sustain like the volume to be there. But I was on a pretty massive heater when I ended up being there. So
yeah,
it is what it is. But for anyone who's like, I think the best thing that I did was never give up. I think I definitely believed in myself along the way. And there were some times where you do want to quit, just ride with it.
Yeah. So you say that YouTube chat was kind of giving you a little bit of shit there then in your first show, the one that ultimately was the show that you won, and they were like, we don't want to hear from this guy. We want to hear from Fast Eddie Fear.
Yeah.
And then
and he has kind of a cult following, and he knows that. And rightfully so. He had earned that credibility over time. But I also need to establish some credibility on my end. And I think winning has established that.
Everybody loves a winner, as the mountain goes. Everybody loves a winner.
Yeah. And listening to people who win is pretty valuable, I'd say.
And did you also did you win with the picks that you told people to play, the guys you told people to play, or were you holding back the good plays on your first shot?
No, I believe I believe I brought out the different scenarios, and I know the lineup in my head that won. So
yeah,
it went Siakam MVP, Curry in the star spot. The pro spot was Kawhi Leonard, and then it went Danny Green, Marc Gasol. So I know the lineup that won. It just
okay.
Well, and then I remember my first six-figure lineup. The other lineups I don't remember, but the first big ones, that the stepping stones, I do remember to heart.
Okay, I was making a joke. Obviously, I know that you weren't withholding picks from people. That's
no,
just
I'm
the
pretty open
accusation
about
that people
my
make.
picks.
Yeah,
especially on the slate starter. The guys I mentioned, I do play them. So
yeah. All right, RynPak, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at RynPak. That's RynPak. My DMs are not open. If you do want to send me an email, I will respond to you an email. You can email me at rayen@awesemo.com or rayenp@gmail.com. I will respond to an email if you do send me an email. If you do need to get me on Twitter, I will follow you and DM you for sure. I'm happy to have a conversation. But that's you can. I'm not too hard to get a hold of. You can find me on the Awesemo Discord as well.
And you like talking DFS, so people should not be afraid to reach out if they have questions for you.
Oh yeah, I'd love to talk about DFS, and if any questions about any sport, not any sport, the major sports, I'm happy to talk about with you.
Right on. All right. Well, thanks again to RynPak for joining me on episode 11 of High Stakes, and to Mike Lawrence for producing as always. You can find episode 12 of High Stakes next Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern on the Awesemo YouTube channel or wherever podcasts live. Have a great weekend. See you later.